everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Whatever, Whenever podcast. I am your host, Josh Reeves. This is episode 3 of the show, and, I'd not planned that this episode of the show was going to be about what it is about today. I just actually put up episode 2, I guess Thursday or Friday, whenever it was. Thursday. And, I just planned this was going to be yet another episode like I had planned on doing. This is such a new show. We just started with this show. And I'm glad I did my... Kind of strange. I was looking back on it and I was thinking, I don't know why I chose to do that. Last week on episode 2, I did my UFC 246 preview. UFC 246 coming up this coming Saturday, January 18th. And normally I would have done that on this episode. You know what I mean? The week before, right before it. I was looking back and going, why did I do that a week early? And then I said, well, that was kind of a screw up. I should have waited and done that until, the week before the actual fight. But what I was going to do is I was just going to, on weeks when there's not fights, I hadn't even talked about this, is what I had planned on doing. I was going to go and, on weeks, and I'll do this in future episodes on, excuse me. I apologize. On future episodes, I was going to go back and talk about other fights, from the past and review those. I thought that would be a cool thing to do. It was just weird. It was just odd that there was just no rhyme or reason as to why I did that. Kind of felt like it was a screw up. And then the news broke Friday of the death of Neil Peart of Rush. And I had, in the first episode of the Whatever Whenever podcast, and I had the discussion, you guys remember if you heard the episode, I had the discussion about, all things fandom and what it means to be a fan of something and, and being proudly a fan of that, and how even though sometimes it's difficult and you're not, sometimes you're a fan of things that nobody else is a fan of, and it's very difficult. And I talked about the days when it wasn't easy to be a Rush fan and going through that. And I just talked about that, and then we had the news come out on Friday of the passing of Neil. So it's just very strange. I guess it's just fate or meant to be, because the number 3 looms large in the world of Rush, being that, there's, of course, three members of the band, the Holy Trinity, as they're referred to. The cover of the Hold Your Fire album from 1987, which had the 3 balls of fire in the Trinity triangular formation on the cover. So it looms large within the world of Rush. So when I realized that episode 3 was going to end up being entirely dedicated to Rush and Neil and that thing, it just, and knowing that I would have normally, it was just so weird that I talked about UFC 246 last week, and I at the time was like, I screwed up. I should have waited. Why did I talk about that last week? Didn't make any sense why I did that. I should have talked about something else and then talked about UFC 246 this week. And then Neil passed away, and I went, okay, I get it now. That's why all things happen for a reason, man. That's why that happened. So, as you already probably guessed, this entire episode will be entirely dedicated to Rush. And I got to give you a disclaimer out of the gates before I start this show. A few disclaimers here right out of the gates. Number one, if you're not a Rush fan and you don't like Rush, turn this show off right now. Just go ahead and don't even listen. Don't even bother. Don't even want you to listen. It's not for you. This is not for you. And in a way, it's, to be honest with you, as I've talked about, I've been doing my other show. This is my 13th year. And one thing I've had to learn to do in all this time, one thing all these years of doing all this has taught me, one thing I've had to do is to put away all of my own selfish wants and needs, and it sucks, and to dedicate myself entirely to something else that isn't largely for me at all. It's more for the benefit of everybody else. And I gotta be honest. This show is a very selfish show. This show is really for me because I need to do it, and for all the fellow Rush fans out there like myself. So that's the first disclaimer. If you're not a Rush fan, they're not your thing, you're not into their music, I would advise you not even to listen to this show. If you want to, hey, go ahead. Number two, if you are opposed to, as Jay from Jay and Silent Bob once said, quote, if you are of the belief that, as Jay once said, quote, there ain't nothing worse than watching a fucking fat man weep, tune out now. Because I probably am going to be, there's probably going to be some breakdown moments for me in this. I'm just going to tell you right away. I surprised I actually was been able to pull myself together enough just to be able to get up here and do this show today, but I couldn't wait any longer. I didn't want to wait any longer. And to be 100% honest with you, right now, and this will pass, and this is part of the process, but right now, all that other bullshit just doesn't appeal to me. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm just not in the headspace or the mindset to talk about all the stuff I talk about on the other show. And also, with that said, that brings me to another case. This is not the conspiratorial show. Okay? That other show is the conspiratorial stuff. If you leave comments on this show that have to do with conspiratorial stuff, they're getting deleted right out. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm letting you know right now, up front. So if you want to talk about conspiratorial stuff, about Rush or Neil or anything else, this is not the show for that. And that's not what this is for. So I'm not going to tolerate that. So other than that, if you can deal with all that, then welcome. And we're going to get into it. And I'm going to do my best. And I don't care how long this takes. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if I don't know how long the show's going to be. I don't care if it's 4 hours. I don't care if it's 2 hours. I don't care if I have to do it in 2 different parts. I'm going to do it till I have said everything I feel like I need to say about the man and the band. First off, though, in terms of what I talked about with my other show that I do and stuff, and kind of what that entails, I can tell you, I made this post on Facebook and stuff. I mean, I could tell you without question, and I've thought about it and rethought about it and searched and thought about it again ever since Friday when the news first broke. I can tell you unequivocally, there's no bigger influence. It has never been a bigger influence on me and who I am as a person and a musician and a free thinker and a truth seeker and everything. There's not ever has there ever been a bigger influence on me than Neil Peart. There there just isn't. I struggled and tried to think, and I don't think I ever realized it or acknowledged it until the news broke that he died. And I think it was at that moment that I realized, oh my God, I realized the impact that it had on me. I mean, it just, it's very difficult to put into words, because I got to tell you, the man and his music have been in my life. Seriously, I say this is no joke, pretty much my entire life. Even before, this is what's crazy. Since even before I even knew the band was called Rush. It's crazy. I didn't even know they were called Rush or the band. I didn't for a long time. I first heard Rush's music. I first heard Tom Sawyer when I was 5 years old in 1981. I heard it in two different places, and I can remember exactly where I heard it. And to this day, every time I listen to the Moving Pictures record, it always reminds me of that time period in the early 80s of being a little kid and going to the arcade. My dad taking me to the arcade, because I can remember he used to take me to this arcade. It was called Carousel Raceway. It was on Garland Road in Dallas, in Lockwood, East Dallas, not far from where my grandparents used to live. And I can remember he took me there. I can remember going there in 1980 when I was 4 years old. I can remember this whole day like it was yesterday. I can remember my dad picking me up and taking me to Carousel Raceway. We played video games. This place was great. It was like an indoor, like they had like slot car racer things in there. And they had arcade games. I remember they had these crazy games that had actual animals in them. They had one it was like a chicken game. Anybody remember that? Anybody that grew up in the 70s or 80s, remember it was like you could never get away with that. Now it was like a chicken game, a tic-tac-toe game. They had a live chicken in it. And you would play tic-tac-toe against a chicken. Never forget that. And they had like those, you remember like from Big, the Zoltar, had one of those Zoltar Speaks things. And they had a female one too. It was like a gypsy. She had like a crystal ball, and it was animatronic, and it would move and talk, and it would spit out your like fortune on a card out of it. I remember that. I remember like a submarine game. My dad used to have to stand me up on these stools, and you look in this place, submarine. I remember all this stuff, and I remember that was the first time I ever heard. I remember I heard Bruce Springsteen's "Everybody's Got a Hungry Heart" when I was like 4 at Carousel Raceway. And the next year I was 5, and I remember going to Carousel Raceway again and hearing Tom Sawyer. I remember hearing Tom Sawyer in there. And then right around that time, I remember hearing Tom Sawyer a lot that year. That was the year it came out, and that was, of course, the biggest song, so it was everywhere. And if you're not from Dallas, you probably aren't familiar with this, but there used to be a wrestling promotion here in Dallas called World Class WCCW, World Class Championship Wrestling. And it had the famous Von Erich wrestling family. It was really the precursor to what later would become the WWE, which later became the WWF. And a lot of the WWF fighters got their start wrestling in the WCCW promotion here in Dallas at the Sportatorium. But everybody knows the Ultimate Warrior. Well, he started out here as the Dingo Warrior. The Iceman, King Parsons, the Undertaker. What was the Undertaker's guy's name? Percy. What was his name? Percy Pringle. All those guys all started here in Dallas. But the Von Erich family they were fucking rock stars here in Dallas. I can't believe nobody's made a proper movie about the Von Erich shit. Maybe I'm going to have to do that one day. But of course, everybody was familiar. Von Erichs were it was just tragic. I mean, so many of them died. So it was a lot of weird stuff surrounding them. But, Kerry Von Erich went on to become a star in the WWF, which, again, later became the WWE, and he was known as the Texas Tornado. But before he was known as the Texas Tornado, when he first came out and started wrestling, it was on the local, was Channel 11, Saturday nights. I remember I used to watch it with my uncle, man, when I was 5 years old. I used to watch the Von Erich. Kerry Von Erich was my favorite. And every time Kerry Von Erich, his nickname back then was not the Texas Tornado. You know what his nickname was back then? His nickname was the Modern Day Warrior. And I can remember, I could watch, like it was yesterday, man. I was 5. I remember like it was yesterday. I remember sitting in front of that big old wooden console TV. You remember those? At my grandparents' house in East Dallas. I can remember, ladies and gentlemen, the Modern Day Warrior, Kerry Von Erich. You hear that swoosh of the synthesizer. Modern Day Warrior, mean stride. Today's Tom Sawyer, mean pride. Da-da-da-da. And there were Kerry Von Erich would come out, and I didn't, for years, and then that kind of I stayed into that stuff. That then, like the next year, or a couple years later, I kind of got out of it and didn't watch it as much, and then he quit being the Modern Day Warrior, but I never forgot that song. I always remember that song, and I remember, I don't know, I think I was probably in like 5th grade, maybe 87, 88, I think it was, and I remember I was at school and I was at lunch and I was having a conversation with some friends. We were talking about old stuff. I mean, we were in 5th grade, but I mean, it was funny how we were having these conversations about things from the past, like we were old, like we were old timers or something even then. Hey, you remember this commercial? Hey, you remember the show? Do you remember that cartoon that used to come on early in the morning called Star Blazers? Do you remember that show? It was like the first anime. And we were having this conversation, and I was like, and I always remembered that Modern Day Warrior song. I just thought it was called the Modern Day Warrior song for the longest time. I didn't know it was called Tom Sawyer, and I didn't know that it was performed by the band Rush. I only knew that there was a song called that I knew as the Modern Day Warrior song that Kerry Von Erich used to walk out to before he would have his wrestling matches, and I remember asking people, hey, who sings the Modern Day Warrior song? Nobody ever knew. I'd ask adults, I'd ask, hey, do you know who sings the Modern? And they'd be like, Modern Day Warrior song? What are you talking about? No one ever knew what I was talking about. It used to drive me crazy. I was trying to find out, find that song. There was no internet back then. I'd ask people, nobody ever knew what the hell I was talking about. And finally, this girl at school, when I was probably in 5th or 6th grade, 87, 88, somewhere there, I was like 10 or 11, she knew what it was. She was like, oh yeah, I know that song. My dad has that. He used to listen to it all the time. And she still didn't know what the name of the band was, but she's like, I know that song. She's like, I've heard it. And I kind of thought maybe she was just pulling my chain or something, kind of a little, So, no, I know that song. I've heard it. My dad used to listen to that all the time. Like, really? Oh, okay, well, that doesn't help me, And I would never forget one day she came to school. And I remember she had this look on her face. God, wherever that girl is, God bless you. She had this look on her. She was like, Josh. Say, hey, I got something for you. She's like, here, I found it. She's like, I was like, you found it? She's like, found it. She's like, my dad had it. I took it from here. This is for you. And I'll never forget it. It's like out of a movie. It's like a scene out of a movie. It was just one of those pivotal, life-changing moments you never forget. She pulled it out of her book bag, and there it was. She handed it to me. It was a cassette. I remember it had had a tan back on the cassette, and that's what I saw first with the label. And then she turned it over, and I saw the black front with the guys taking the paintings into the museum. And then I saw it, Rush, Moving Pictures. She's like, that's it, Tom Sawyer, that's it. She's like, I listened to it. That's the Modern Day Warrior song. She's like, here, this is for you. I got to go. And she took off, and I remember at that time I had this little, I got for Christmas, I think that year I had this little, it was like a little mono cassette player. It only had one speaker on it. And I'll never forget, I couldn't wait to get home that day. I got home, I put that cassette in a player, I hit play. The first thing I heard was that synthesized bass. And there it was, Modern Day Warrior, mean stride, the days Tom Sawyer, mean pride. Ding, ding, ding. That was it, dude. That was it. That was it. I was just like, oh my God, I finally found it. And I remember listening to that whole tape. And when it was done, I flipped it over and I listened to it again. I listened to that thing until my batteries ran out. And I had no batteries left. I couldn't listen to it again until I got more batteries. I don't know if you remember this or not, but fuck, man. When you were a kid, batteries were like a fucking precious commodity when you were a kid. Batteries were like gold. It's, you take it for granted now. Batteries just like, it's like nothing, whatever batteries. Back then, batteries were like gold. You're not fucking like fishing around, trying to go steal shit out of your dad's flashlight and shit to just get your tape player working again. The struggle was real back in those days. But that was it, man. And I didn't, I remember asking my dad, do you know who Rush is? My dad didn't even know who Rush was back then. He did later, but back then, you got to remember, they didn't get played on classic rock radio, and there wasn't even really classic rock radio until classic rock radio didn't even become a thing till like the late 80s, 89, 90, something like that. It wasn't until then. And even then, they weren't playing a lot of Rush then. He'd probably heard of them, but just didn't remember or whatever. I don't know. I just remember him saying, no, I never heard of him. I'm sure he had. But, so that was probably about 87, 88, somewhere in there. And, for the longest time, Moving Pictures was the only thing I ever had or heard. Because I never saw any of their other albums. I never found anybody else that even was into Rush or had any of their records where I could even, again, it was a different time back then. And, so yeah, that was probably 87, 88. And then fast forward a few years, you got to remember too, at that age, especially when you're young, a year or 2 years, you're changing, you're growing your volume, everything so much that even a year or 2 years at that point can seem like a long time. But I think that was one of the first things that really got me, into music. And then in 89, I was at the skate park and was into skateboarding for a year or two. During that time, got into punk rock. And then I moved out to the sticks in November 1990, started living with my grandparents. And, there was, I got it. There was no, you couldn't skateboard out there. There was nowhere to skateboard out in the sticks, out in the country. You couldn't, there was just nowhere to do it. So I got out of skateboarding. And then I had a friend. It's crazy how pivotal certain people that just seem sort of, to come through your life sometimes can be. I had a friend, Steve, that I used to go stay weekends with. His parents were loaded, had a huge house. He had this older brother that was a big music guy. I remember, I'll never forget going into his room, and his room was like a temple to rock music. And this guy he was a huge fan of Yngwie Malmsteen. And I remember he had Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force, these huge wall posters. And I remember within the barrage of Yngwie Malmsteen posters that he had in his room, and also guitars, It was kind of the first time I'd seen his parents when they were super rich. So he had his older brother at the time was probably, because we were like, 13, 14. And his brother was probably like 16, 17 or something like that, 18, older. He had a car. I remember he had all these guitars. He had Jacksons, and it was the first time I'd ever seen, all these guitars. He had, but in the midst of all these posters, he had a big, giant Rush Hemispheres poster in there. And this was the first time I'd even encountered anybody else that was even into Rush, I was like, whoa, you like Rush? He's like, oh, yeah, I like Rush. And one weekend, this was 90, let's see. This is like 92, I believe, about 92. I would have been about 15 at the time. And again, I got to tell you, for the longest time, I didn't even know. I knew nothing else about Rush except Moving Pictures. That's all I knew. I never heard anybody listen to their records. I never saw their records for sale anywhere, anything else. Moving Pictures was all I had for the longest time. I remember one weekend, I went to go stay over at my friend Steve's house, and his parents would go out of town a lot and stuff. And, man, his older brother, I got to go to a lot of the early concerts that I got to go to was because of this guy's older brother, because his parents, I'd go in there and stay, and his parents would be like, well, we're going out of town, so you gotta, you can't go out, you gotta stay with, with the kids, basically, me and my friend Steve. But the stipulation was that if he did go somewhere, he had to take us with him. So because of that, a few times, I got to go to some concert, my earliest concerts, rock concerts, because of that. I remember, I think the very first concert I ever went to, a rock concert. I'd gone to some concerts, like stuff with my parents or stuff that like outdoor stuff with grandparents. So I don't really count that. My first rock show was Red Hot Chili Peppers. This would have been 91. Mother's Milk Tour. This is before Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, about a year before it came out, before they hit super big. They were relatively big at this point, but they weren't mega huge yet. And there was two unknown opening bands. This is right before alternative music and grunge hit and all that stuff too. And there was two opening bands that opened for them. Was at the fucking Bronco Bowl here in Dallas, no longer there. It was a bowling alley that they turned into a bowling alley and a concert venue. And, two opening bands that nobody knew of that at that time because they were just new up and coming bands. You know how it is. You go see a band, the headliner, and then there's two unknown bands opening. The two unknown bands opening. The first band, which I thought was okay, but you know how it is. It's kind of a point I'm getting to here that I'm getting to with my first Rush show too. You know how if you don't know a band's material, it doesn't matter how great they are. It's hard to be blown away by something if you don't know the song. So remember the first band, I think they had just come out with their first album. The first opening band was a band called Pearl Jam. I remember thinking they were okay or whatever. And then the next band was a band called the Smashing Pumpkins. And I'll never forget because I just remember it was Gish Tour. I didn't know their music at that point yet either. But I just remember being blown away because I just had never seen two guitar players that were playing leads simultaneously. Now, I'd seen lead guitar players playing simultaneously like, Iron Maiden or that kind of thing, but not where they were playing two leads simultaneously and playing two completely different leads. Like they weren't even playing the same song. Like one guy's playing one solo and the other guy's playing another solo, and yet it fit together. I'd never seen that. I'm really blown away. And then, of course, you want to talk about a moving moment. Jesus. And then Red Hot Chili Peppers come out. And they had doing the cover of Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder. I guess that was like their hit single at something at the time. I just remember the lights went down and everybody screams and then and the lights go up, boom, and these guys come out on stage, and these guys are butt ass fucking naked, except for fucking socks hanging from their dongs. And I just went, what the fuck? I mean, it was a fucking life-changing moment. And the show was fantastic. And that was the first time. And then later that was the first time I got to go to a real concert, on my own without parents. I mean, it was just, it was crazy. And then another time we weren't with his older brother. We were actually with his parents, and we were at this place in Dallas called the Info Mart. And we went to some, I forget what it was some kind of health expo or something, some bullshit. I stayed the weekend with him, and his parents were going to this, so they made us go with them. And I remember we were in the car, and we'd heard that they're like, hey, don't forget, going on today in the West End, downtown Dallas, because they had to cancel their show here a while back, playing a free show later today in the West End, Van Halen. And we were a mile from there. And we talked his parents into taking us down there. And there's actually fucking footage of it on YouTube. Yeah, Van Halen was supposed to play here, and they had to cancel, and Sammy Hagar called into the local rock station at the time, Q102, and said, hey, we're going to make it up to you. We're going to come back and play a free show. And I swear, everybody in Dallas was there. It was pandemonium. It was crazy. It was wild. And it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then a few months after, there was been around the same time, kind of all blurs together during that time, was all within about a year. This would have been about 92. I was probably about 15 by this point. Same situation. I'd gone to stay with my friend Steve's house for the weekend. His parents were going out of town. Hey, if you go anywhere, you got to take these guys with you. You got to remember, too, concert tickets were not anything like they are now back then. I mean, I think the tickets to go to that Red Hot Chili Pepper show, I think they were $10, maybe $8. The Van Halen one was free. And then another time, he was like, they were like, okay, you got if you go anywhere, you got to take them with you. You can't leave them here by yourself. Okay. And I remember coming over to his house that weekend and walking through the door, and his brother going, hey, remember you were telling me, remember you were talking about my poster on my wall? I kind of forgot what he was talking about at that point. And I was like, what poster? He's like, remember you were asking me about that poster in my room, the Rush poster? I was like, oh, yeah. What about it? And he was like, well, they're playing here this weekend, and I'm going. I'm like, oh, man, you lucky bastard, I was like, damn, wow. And he just had this look at this big smile on his face, and he was like, well, you know what the rules are. And he's like, I can't go unless I take you fuckers with me. So guess what? You fuckers are going to see Rush with me this weekend. And I was like, holy shit. And again, I didn't, at that point, I had moving pictures. That was it. So the first time I saw Rush, it wasn't as impactful on me as it was the second time I saw them in 1994 on the Counterparts tour. Because, like I said, when you're not familiar, Rush had been a band for 20 years at that point. Damn near 20 years at that point. And it wasn't like now, you want to play catch up on a band, you can go get caught up in a band you never heard of in a night on YouTube or something, Back then it was, I can't tell you how it was much harder back then to get your hands on music, especially if it was a band that had a catalog of music, especially a band like Rush that wasn't played on the radio, didn't have singles, MTV hits. And I remember it was at Reunion Arena, the Roll the Bones tour. And I had just seen, late night on MTV, not long before that, I had seen the video for the song Roll the Bones on late at night, 1 o'clock in the morning on MTV or something. I remember just being blown away, wow, it was the only other thing I'd ever heard from Rush besides Moving Pictures, and It had a rap section in it, and it had like this animated skeleton rapping in it. I was just like, this is crazy. I can't believe these guys are still around, and they're making music that's, modern and stuff. It was crazy. So the first time I saw Rush, it was really, that show was really a blur. It was really a blur for a lot of years. It wasn't until after the advent of the internet and YouTube and stuff, when I went back and watched bootlegs, listened to bootlegs and stuff from the Roll the Bones tour, that I had a much greater appreciation for that show. The big thing I remember from it, though, was that it was the same situation as the Red Hot Chili Pepper show. There was an opening band, yet again, another up-and-coming opening band that nobody had ever heard of. And we went to our seats, and we were way up in the fucking nosebleeds at Reading Arena. And the lights go down. Everybody's thinking, okay, here comes this shitty whatever. No, nobody knows. You never know how it's going to go with an opening band, especially back then. Here comes the opening band. Lights go down here. Bam, 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 bam. The crowd on its feet erupts, roars. They're playing YYZ by Rush. It's why was it? Everybody at that moment was like, "Oh my God, they fooled us! There's no opening band. It's fucking Rush. They're here. Holy shit!" Rah, rah. And then the lights go up, and you're like, "Who the fuck are these guys? That ain't Rush. Who the fuck are these goofy looking motherfuckers?" And they were playing YYZ, and it sounded fucking just like Rush. And ended up being a band called Primus. And that was the day I became a Primus fan for sure. But again, I didn't, I walked away from that concert thinking it was a good concert. But other than like the song Roll the Bones, which I'd seen the video for, and all the stuff from Moving Pictures, I wasn't familiar with any of the rest of the stuff. I just remember there was a guy sitting next to us, because we were young, me and my friend were young, we were like 15. He said, "Hey man, is this y'all first Rush show?" We're like, yeah, it's the first time. He's like, "Man, I've seen every single tour since Hemispheres in 77. Y'all can get your fucking minds blown. Woo!" I'll never forget it. And, but again, if you're not familiar with a band's material, it doesn't matter how great they are. It doesn't really affect you. It won't really have the impact it does. So my first time seeing Rush, it didn't really have that impact on me. But after that, and again, at that time, especially when you're a teenager growing up, between 1992 on the Roll the Bones tour and 1994, again, 2 years doesn't seem like a long time as an adult, but 2 years as a child, it's an eternity. Time moves so much slower in youth, and it's such a transformative time. You're growing so rapidly. Your knowledge is expanding. What you're into is expanding. You're constantly changing your attitudes, your personality, everything. And between that time, between 1992, when I saw the Roll the Bones tour, and between 1994, when the album Counterparts came out, that was also the time when you had the explosion of grunge music and Nirvana and alternative music, which I was into from day one. But also during that time, I had also, because remember, I was 15 and at the time, and I started working. I started having a job right out of the gates. I mean, my parents I broke my foot when I was in 5th grade, so I got held back a year, even though I didn't need to. So when I was a freshman, the time I was a freshman, I was the only freshman that had a fucking car. I had a car, because I had my first job when I was 15 or 16. I started working at McDonald's. I had my first car. I was able to start buying my own records. I started getting into wanting to play music around that time. My dad bought me my first bass around that time. So it was a very transformative time between that age of when I first saw Rush on the Roll the Bones tour, and then the Counterparts album came out And I remember hearing Rush had a new album coming out, and they kept saying, they kept saying, like in the magazines and stuff, they kept saying that Rush was coming out with a grunge record. That's what people kept saying. I'll never forget that. I remember people saying that. And of course it wasn't, but what it was a more of a return. Rolling Bones and some of the previous albums going back, you know, from the late 80s, from like, say, maybe Hold Your Fire, Presto, Roll the Bones. I like all those records. Now, I like all the periods of Rush. I'm not one of those phony, fake Rush fans that says, oh, I don't like the synthesizer period, I don't like the 80s period. If you say that, you're not a true Rush fan, fuck off. You're automatically out. I hear so many people that claim they're the biggest Rush fan. Oh, but I don't like that period. Well, you know, you can say you like one period more than the other. Say to discount one period or the 80s period records because you don't like synthesizers or something. Fuck off. Fuck off. Just fuck off. Those records are just as important as any period that they had. But and then Counterparts came out, and it was that. It sounded. I remember getting it. You know, it was heavy. It sounded heavy sounding. The guitars were, you know, distorted. That was right around the time when Beavis and Butthead was coming out. I never forget they played the video for the first single from Counterparts, Stick It Out. They played that on Beavis and Butthead, and it had that like heavy guitar riff being at the beginning of it. And Beavis and Butthead were like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. And then you hear... trust in your instincts. You hear Getty come on singing, and B was like, oh, God, it's Rush. Invisible airwaves crackle with like, right the 10, I'll breathe with the energy. I just remember dying laughing, and I was like, oh, shit, there it is. And I remember I got, this is crazy. You know, I used to have so many arguments with people. I mean, knockdown, drag out fights with people because, you know, I've always just liked music. I like hip hop. I like some electronic music. I like some country music, especially real country music, classic country music, not the fucking, you know, mainstream Nash Vegas horse shit. I like punk rock. I like heavy metal. I like progressive rock. I like a little bit of everything. It's music. If it's good, I like it. It's the way I've always been. But I had so many people, you can't like Black Flag and the Descendants and the Ramones and like Pink Floyd and Queen and Rush. Yeah, I can. Yeah, of course I can. Of course. No, you fucking can't, dude. You fucking can't. You fucking can't. I remember people saying that to me. You fucking can't. Like mad. You can't fucking like Pink Floyd and like fucking whoever, you know, punk band too. Yeah, you can, and I do, and if you don't like it, fuck off. Seriously, I lost friends over shit like that. I mean, I remember, you can't like Nirvana. Nirvana is anti-mainstream. You can't. No, bullshit. They're on a major label. The fucking same label that was putting out Guns N' Roses a couple of years before was putting out Nirvana records. Fuck off. Idiots. I remember I walking in, I remember I bought Nirvana in Utero when it came, and Counterparts. They came out, I don't know if they came out on the same day, but they came out almost at the exact same time. But I remember buying Rush Counterparts and Rush in Utero at the same time. And in fact, I saw Nirvana on the In Utero tour at the Fair Park Coliseum in Dallas in December 1993. And then 2 months later, I saw Rush on the Counterparts tour. And between that time of seeing Rush on the first time, I had gotten, like I said, I started working my first job. I had my own money at that time. So I was able to go. And between with that just small span of 2 years, I was able to get my hands on a lot more Rush records. And I talked about a bit in the first episode of the Whatever podcast. I talked about, you know, this thing where literally, man, you can't understand what it was like to be a Rush fan back in those days. you could not tell anyone you were a Rush fan. It was not wise. It was not a smart thing to do. To tell people you were a Rush fan. It was not advised. It was not advisable. In fact, to this day, I've never seen anything like this. I remember during this time period in which I was finally starting to get my hands on my own Rush records, have my own money and stuff, I would go to places like Walmart and I would find what they call cutouts. And these were like albums that weren't big sellers, and they would cut like slits in the side of the cases. And then they would throw them in like the discount bin. And I remember a couple of times, I got Rush Hold Your Fire. I got that in the discount bin for like $2 on cassette. I mean, $2. I mean, that was a treasure for me in those days, man. I didn't care if it was an album that maybe that album didn't sell as much as another one or whatever. I remember I got Presto on cassette at Walmart for like $1 on like a discount bin. That was fucking solid gold. That was a solid gold treasure to me, man. A fucking Rush cassette for $1? Are you kidding me? I'll never forget going up to the counter at Walmart to buy this Rush cassette and having the person working behind the counter at Walmart. Now think about that for a second. You work at Walmart, motherfucker. I'll never forget this. I've never had this happen with any other band or anything. And I've dealt with some snobby fucking record store clerks in my time. I've been a snobby fucking record store clerk in my time. I'll never forget walking up to the cash register at Walmart and having the person behind the counter when I walk up there to buy, go, fucking Rush, what the fuck you buying that for? Like, dude, you work at fucking Walmart. I don't think you're qualified to judge my musical taste when you work at fucking Walmart. I mean, this guy was like shaming me. I'm not kidding you. It happened a couple times. Remember when I bought the Hold Your Fire cassette? That was at Hastings in the mall. But I unbelievable. Unfucking believable. I've never experienced anything like that where you would get shamed. People would shame you for buying a Rush record in those days. I couldn't believe it. It was just such a shock to me because it was like all these years I couldn't find these. I just could never figure out. I was like, what's this? What's the stigma? And everybody's, oh, they're fucking nerds. They're fucking nerds. You're a fucking nerd if you listen to that music. Fucking nerd music. Fucking shit. You should be listening to fucking Metallica. Fucking Metallica. Fucking Black Album. It's the fucking shit. Fuck that gas. Fucking Rush bullshit. And, but, you know, I didn't care. And I remember what really got me, what really expanded my Rush palette, what really made me become the fan that I became was they had this, it was one of the first CDs, when CDs first started coming, one of the first CDs I got, it was called, oh gosh, it's going to drive me, Chronicles. That's what it was called, Rush Chronicles. It was a 2 CD set. I'll never forget. It was the first thing I ever got. It was one of those thick CD cases. They later started putting, when they did double CDs back in those days, it wasn't like they did later where they would put 2 CDs in a single tray. Back in those days, if you got a double CD set, it was a thick case that had 2 sides on it, the booklet in between. And it was called Rush Chronicles. And I believe it had everything. It had songs from all the albums they had put out up until, I think, Hold Your Fire. It didn't have anything past Hold Your Fire. And I think it had Time Stand Still on it. And I think that was the first time I heard Time Stand Still. And then I got the cassette, Hold Your Fire, that had Time Stand Still and Mission and all those songs. It's still one of my favorite songs. There's a couple of clunker songs on that record, but still one of my favorite records was Hold Your Fire. And, but Rush Chronicles that was the first time I got real exposure to all of their music going back to the first record. It was mind-blowing. I could not believe, first of all, I had no idea that this band had been putting out music for as long as they had. And going back through, starting out from the first album, you know, ding 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 ding. Yeah, oh yeah. If I did my way, I've been gone so long, I lost track of the years. I mean, it was like, This is like fucking Zeppelin. I didn't know at that time that, Neil wasn't in the band until after that. I just was like, wow, this is crazy. And all the songs, and I was just floored. It was such an experience listening to that Chronicles disc because I could see this, because I heard the new stuff. I heard Counterparts and all that. But going back and hearing, and I could hear the progression. I could hear how they progressed along and how these lyrics went from being sort of simple, finding my way, and they call me the working man. I guess that's what I am, and all that stuff from the beginning, and then, into, all the other stuff, Anthem of the heart and anthem of a mind, a funeral dirge, her eyes gone blind, and all that. And I just, and on, and then 2112, and then I heard I heard like 2 of the songs on 2112, and then I had to have 2112 after that. There was a period of time where I was like, anytime I got my paycheck or something, like every 2 weeks it was like I was going and buying a Rush record like every couple. So point is, by the time they came back to Dallas on the Counterparts tour in January 1994, I was, I had, God, it only been 2 years, but man, I'd grown so much during that time. My musical taste, I'd heard so much, and I was full blown into Rush by that time. Like I was in it. I knew so much more of their material. And so I was stoked. When I heard they were coming to Dallas, Reunion Arena, I lived with my grandparents at that time. I remember I called my dad and, Dad, that band I was telling you about that I like, Rush. He's like, yeah, what about it? I'm like, they're coming to town, And I wasn't, by this time, I wasn't friends with my other friend anymore and stuff because I'd moved and all that stuff. But I asked my dad, hey, will you take me to see Rush? He's like, yeah, I'll take you. I'll go with you. And it'll be fun, whatever. And he planned on doing it. And then some time passed and we got closer to the show. And I called him and I was like, hey, the Rush show's coming up like in a week, coming up on Friday or whatever day it was. And he was like, well, and then he'd forgotten. He's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to go. I wasn't missing this fucking show for nothing. Not for anything. He's like, well, I can't go with you, but if you're going to go, you come by and I'll give you I'll pay for your ticket. I'll give you money for your ticket or whatever. Well, I was like, I think I was like in between paychecks or something at McDonald's. I was going to get paid like the next week or something. So it was like the concert was on that Friday. I wasn't going to get paid again until the next Friday. And another friend of mine from high school, I think he'd had his license, I don't know, a month, 2 months maybe. He hadn't been driving very long. And he certainly had not been driving on, the highways and crazy shit in Dallas. So my dad was like, come by and I'll give you money, I had like $20 in my name. It was all the money I had. And that was to last me for the next week for gas and everything, and stuff for school. And I had $20. And I remember I was like, okay, because you could get a floor ticket back then for like $40. So I had 20. I was like, Dad's giving me 20. I got a fucking, that'll cover it or whatever. My friend, I don't think he had very much money either, but I was like, we'll have enough, whatever. Let's just go. So I remember we went to my dad's house and of course got over there and he's, oh, I forgot. And no, I'm sorry. I don't have any money for you. I fucking spent it at the liquor store. Oh, I was so fucking mad. Oh, God, I was so mad. I was so mad at him for so long. In fact, I don't even think I spoke to I seriously didn't. I don't think I even spoke to my dad for a few months after. I was so mad at him. God, I was so mad at him. I was like, you're not going to ruin this. You're not going to fucking ruin this for me. Man, I've been waiting for this. This is not. And my friend was like, well, let's just go home. I'm like, no, fuck that, dude. Fuck that. Let's go down there. We'll get in somehow. Let's just fucking go. So we make our way down to fucking Reunion Arena. And we get down there and, the opening band I think is about to start. The opening band on that tour was fucking Candlebox. So we didn't give a fuck about seeing them anyway. So we were like, oh, hey, if it takes us a little longer with this opening band, who gives a fuck? So we get down there. I remember we fucking had to park a mile away and we we were running to get to the fucking box office or run it. But, looking back though, I was mad at my dad at the time or whatever. These are the kind of moments though that define you and, and separate the wheat from the chaff. It define being a fan, as I was talking about, what it means to be a fan. But I was not I didn't give a fuck what I had to do. I was not going to miss this show. So I remember we were running down there. We get to the box office at Reunion Arena. We get up there. We're like trying to figure out how much, ticket. Didn't have enough. I had $20. My friend, I think my friend had $20. And we both had like some change. He had some change in his truck. We were like, oh, let's just get we had like $20 and like, I think we both had a pocket full of change, which wasn't going to leave us anything left, for food or for gas, much less a t-shirt or something. We didn't give a fuck. Got there, got to the box office. We were like, all right, what can we get? What kind of tickets do you got? And I remember they had some like nosebleeders, of course, upper fucking balcony left. And we were like, how much are they? And they were like $20. We're like, fuck it, perfect. We'll take it. And so we had our little $20 each or there, whatever. And she tells the total, and she's like, well, and then she tells the total, and it's like $48.75. We're like, $48.75? You just told it was $20. So, oh, well, service fees, convenience fees, this fee, dick suck fee, whatever. $48.75. We're like, we don't have $48.75. You told us tickets were $20 each. Well, yeah, they are technically, but you got this fee and that. And we're like, what the fuck? No, is there anything cheaper than that? Nope, nothing cheaper than that. That's it. And I remember our friend being, well, man, we tried, dude. We tried, man. Fuck it. Let's go. And I remember, man, putting my foot down. No! I remember the lady at the fucking box office, like, this like startled look on her face. I was like, no, fuck that. Fuck that, dude. We made it this far. I don't give a fuck if I have to fucking strip naked or jack off a fucking bum or something, whatever. We're fucking getting in this fucking show. And we're just sitting there outside the arena, just sitting there, just fucking distraught and walking around going, and this chick, I'll never forget. I saw this chick. She like heard me yelling and screaming. Yeah, God, she was an older chick, which I guess older chick to a guy at 17 or whatever. She was probably early 30s, at the time, which at the time was like older chick, right? She had a dress on. I'll never forget, it was January, so it was kind of cold outside. She had a sweater on. She had kind of a dress. She's smoking hot. Smoking hot. Man, she was an angel sent from heaven, dropped down just for me at that moment, man. She's like, hey, and back then, it was different. Back then, people were, now you go to concerts, actually for a long time, for many years since then, people are always selling tickets at shows. Tickets, who needs tickets? But back then, at that time, 1994, there was, cops would actually, believe it or not, back in those days, cops would actually bust you and arrest you for selling tickets back then. And I remember she was real paranoid. She's like, hey, you guys need tickets? And we're like, yeah, but we don't have enough money. She's like, well, come over here. And I remember they used to have these big pillars that held up the top roof part of Reunion Arena, big round like marble pillars. She's like, come over here. She's like, come over here behind this. She's like, I don't want to do it out here. She's like, come over here. I'm like, what? We can get our dick sucked? What's going on here? I thought she was get my dick sucked. She was like, hey, come over here. And she's like, okay. She's like, how much money you got? We're like, we don't have enough. She's like, what? How much do you got? I go, I got 20. He's got 20. And we both got a fucking pocket full of change. She said, all right, good enough. Here, go. I remember her saying that. Go. She took we're trying to get the change in her hand, and the change was falling down to the ground. And she was like trying to like be sly about she was selling us dope or something. I've just never experienced anything like that before or after. It was crazy. It was just a different time. And she's like, go, run. And we did too. We ran. I mean, we dropped. I remember looking back and seeing her picking up change off the ground with a big smile on her face. Like she knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing, and she knew that she was, about to change some lives with Rush. She knew it. I could see it in her face, dude. I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware. She knew it. So we run and we're running. We get up there, we hand them our tickets, and there's that thing for a half a second where you think, like, was she being like that because she just sold us some bunk tickets or whatever? Get up there, they tear our tickets, we're in. I can hear, God, I can remember this like it was yesterday. I can hear in the distance in the arena, we're walking in, and you can kind of see, or the sections where they have, where the walk through, you go to where the seats are at. And I could see the dark arena, it was full of people. And I could hear that, oh, yeah. I didn't mean to treat you oh so bad, but I did anyway. I could hear Candlebox playing that song. And so we're trying to figure out where the fuck our seats are at. We can't figure out, because, when you buy them from somebody like that, I mean, back then, it's like you had a fucking seating chart, or a phone with the internet. We could just look. We didn't even fucking know. We had no fucking clue where these seats were at. We didn't even have a damn idea. We were just like, whatever. I mean, these seats could have been in the fucking basement or the fucking broom closet for all we knew. So finally we find somebody. We find a fucking an usher. Okay, you're okay. I know right was that. You're over here. We come over and they ended up being like kind of like lower. They actually ended up, believe it or not, they actually ended up being fucking better seats. Way better seats than what we would have got if we would have had the right amount of money. Again, it's just one of those, it's so many things like that with Rush. It's so many just like meant to be things. Had my dad given me the right amount of money, or had my dad went to the concert with me, it wouldn't have worked out. Sometimes things in life, they work out, even though they seem shitty at the time, they work out in ways that unexpectedly you wouldn't have ever thought of, And so we ended up getting way better seats. And I remember, we're going to our seats, and we get to our seats, and thank you, good night. Candlebox played their last song. I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. They played their last song. We didn't have to sit through them. And I remember sitting there. It didn't seem like we were sitting there for very long, really, at all. Oftentimes when the transition between bands, it takes a while. It didn't seem like we were sitting there for very long, and the lights went down, and then all of a sudden I start hearing the theme. And that was the other thing about Rush, too, that I had never experienced, back bands. There wasn't a lot of bands did it later, but they were one of the first bands that had huge video screens and multimedia stuff going on in conjunction with the music, and I remember the lights went down, and on the front of the Counterparts album, it had a nut, a screw, and a bolt on it, kind of representing male and female, or like really like a dick going in a pussy, really. And the theme to 2001: A Space Odyssey comes on, dun, 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 and it's like the nut and the bolt and space Counterparts come together. And then boom, it hits, and the lights go, and there's Rush. And I mean, I just remember sitting there. I remember looking over at my friend, and he's sitting there, and he's just looking forward, and his mouth is just open. It's just like gaped open, staring. I mean, and I was the same way. They did Time Stand Still, and they had these like melting clocks on the screens, and they it was like I knew every fucking song. It was such a different experience between the first time I saw them and the second time I saw them. Because by then I was into, and every song it was like hit. It was like every song I knew. There was not one single song they played I didn't know. It was hit after deep album cut. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was literally the most mind-blowing concert experience I'd ever had in my life. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up here, and I'll read you the set list from that show. It's awesome. If you type, that's so cool. If you type Rush Counterparts Tour into Google, that's awesome. That makes me feel so good. That's so cool. If you type Rush Counterparts Tour into Google, the third video that comes up right at the top says Josh Reeves Global Reality. It's a video from my channel that I made of clips from the Counterparts tour. That's so awesome. But yeah, the first song after the nut and bolt thing was Dreamline, which was a song off of the previous album, Roll the Bones, that of course I was already familiar with that. Dreamline, the Spirit of Radio, The Analog Kid, Cold Fire, Time Stands Still, Nobody's Hero, Roll the Bones, and it had the animated skeleton in the background, Animate, Stick It Out, Double Agent, Limelight, Bravado, Mystic Rhythms. That, when they played Mystic Rhythms, it was transcendent. I was a kid, I was 17, I hadn't even done any drugs yet, and I felt like I was on drugs. Show Don't Tell, Leave That Thing Alone, the drum solo, Neil Peart is throwing his stick to the roof of Reunion Arena the entire show. I've never seen somebody throw a stick in the air that many times constantly. And he did it in other shows out there, but he didn't. This was the only tour I ever saw, because after Counterparts, between Counterparts and the next album, Tesseract, was when he trained with famous drummer Freddie Gruber, who completely changed his technique. But he'd gotten so good with his style up to that point. Dude, he was throwing his stick up to 30 feet up to the ceiling at Reunion Arena through the entire show. I'll never forget that. It was just the entire, and not missing a beat. That was that's the main thing I remember from that show, is seeing his stick go 30 feet up to the roof of Reunion Arena and back down in his hand. And then he comes out and he does his drum solo. And he plays part of it, and then he stops, and then the fucking drum riser lifts up and goes, and spins around. And it spins around, and he's got an electronic kit behind it, and then he starts playing more. I was just like, oh my fuck, this is insane. But going back, after Mystic Rhythms, then was Closer to the Heart. And I remember hearing, I think it was on Exit Stage Left, the live album, you can hear on that recording, you can hear the crowd singing along. And it got to that. There's a bootleg show, audio show. It's not that good. It's like a crowd recorded recording from that Reunion Arena show. And I listened not too long ago. What blew me away about it was that it reminded me, unlike any other Rush show I'd ever been to, people were singing, audibly singing every song. The whole crowd. Deafening, everybody. The whole crowd was singing. Look around, everybody was singing along. I never experienced that in any other Rush show other than that one that I ever went to. It never happened again. It was unfucking believable. And Closer to the Heart was like, I remember being a 17-year-old kid and just having tears in my eyes, because it was like, I was experiencing this moment that I had listened to on record, and I was there, and it was happening, and they were doing Closer to the Heart, and the whole crowd is singing along. And I just remember being like, this is just, man, you don't get this. I hadn't been to a lot of concerts at that point in my life, but I've been to enough already to know that nobody was doing what they were doing. It just felt so like, I don't know, you just felt like you were experiencing something that the rest of the world just wasn't onto yet. And then the drum solo, and then the trees, and then Xanadu, and then Cygnus book 1 from Hemispheres, Tom Sawyer, Force 10, YYZ, then Cygnus book 1, and then that was it. And I remember leaving there sweaty, spent. I felt like I got I felt like I had just been through a war or something. I remember me and my friend, we just didn't even we didn't even say anything. I remember we rode all the way back home, way out in the stick. It was like 45-minute drive all the way back to where we lived at the time. And just in total silence. And just like, all right, see you later. All right, bye. At the end of the night, I remember just laying there just like, And then the next day I had to get up and go work at fucking McDonald's again. I was changed. I was just never the same. That show changed my life. It changed me as a person. It had an effect on me that this is maybe the first time I've ever been able to really somewhat describe what that experience was like. And it changed everything about what I thought music could be. And it changed everything about what because I talked about this in the last show. I never could relate to that 80s butt rock, guys wearing fucking, all the fucking glam rock shit and all the makeup, Motley Crue stuff and all. It didn't, and that's why I liked punk rock, because punk rock, the guys look like normal guys. But then at that Rush, because that was when I was like, I want to be, that was the moment when I was like, I've got to be a musician. I've got to do this. This is what I want to do. I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to do this and that. But that was the thing. Months before that, just a couple of months before that was when it was the second time I'd seen them, but I saw Nirvana on the In Utero tour. And that was when I first kind of had my dad had got me a bass about a year before that, and I learned how to play some Black Sabbath songs, and so I learned how to play Working Man by Rush. But other than just, wanting to learn how to play and that kind of thing, there wasn't sort of this idea. But, Kurt Cobain for me he was the guy that made me, because I at that point I was just like, well, maybe one day I'll have a band, or one day I'll start a band, because you're like, well, you got to learn how to play. And so you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to take lessons, and that's going to, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be a long haul, especially when you're young, you're thinking that way. I mean, Kurt Cobain, what he taught me was that you don't have to wait for all that. You don't have, you can do this. You can start playing music right now. Doesn't matter how good you are. You play fucking 3 chords of the truth, dude. That's all you need. Fucking go, fucking play. But what Rush taught me in a different way, because again, I saw, it's just a span of time. And then a couple of months after that Rush, 2 months after that Rush concert, it was January. So April, after I saw that Rush concert, Kurt Cobain was dead. So I was really going through, mixed emotions, because I wanted to be a much better musician than I was capable of being at that time because of Rush. But also I was inspired by the Kurt Cobain sort of where we just go and just do it. Get better later. That was sort of my attitude and thinking. You'll get better later, but whereas like punk rock and Kurt Cobain, that kind of thing showed me that, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if you had the chops. You could play, and you could start a band, and I did. I started a band shortly after. I started my first. Well, the first band I was in 93, and then I started my first own band that I fronted in 94. So, and that was just a crazy time of change and growth and stuff for me. And between that time and the next time I saw Rush, which was 96 on the Test for Echo tour, that was the first tour I saw 2 legs of. They did 2 legs of that. They did 1 leg at Reunion Arena in like December 96, and I went to that. And then they came back again not very long after that in like May 97, and they did the Shed venue. Every city's got those Shed amphitheaters. And that was pretty much where they played for many years after that. And then they did 2112 in its entirety. Oh, that was my second favorite tour. That was the loudest Rush tour I ever. God, they were loud on that tour. Unbelievably loud. Neil's drums were just, you could feel them in your chest. That was an unbelievably loud. The Counterparts tour and the Test for Echo tour were my 2 favorite tours I ever saw. But I loved all the tours I ever saw. I saw Rush a grand total of 9 times. I wish it would have been more. I really do. But at the same time, I'm grateful I got to see them 9 times, because that's 9 times more than a lot of Rush fans got to see them. And then I didn't hear anything from Rush. And I was going, into my 20s by that time and getting into different types of music. And, my first band I'd started in 94. By that time, 97 or so, had broken up. I just decided not to do it anymore. I was changing how the types of music, the way I was writing songs, getting into different stuff. And I assumed for a long time Rush just broke up. I really did. I didn't hear anything about what had happened with Neil and his family until later. And I remember they came out with this live set CD called Different Stages. And it was a compilation of live recordings that were from all the tours that I had seen up to that point. It was a compilation of all of different songs from Roll the Bones tour, Counterparts tour, and the Test for Echo tour. And it had a third bonus disc that was like Hammersmith Odeon 77, or like right around the Thrill to Kings tour, which was just phenomenal, because they had never released a live album from that tour around that time. And then, I just didn't even hear, I don't even remember when. It was a long time before I heard any of the details or anything about Neil, that his daughter was killed in a car accident shortly after the last show of the Test for Echo tour in 97. And then like a year later, his wife, Jackie, got cancer and died of cancer. And I didn't really hear any of the details of that for a long time. I had heard, everybody was saying Rush was done. They were over with and it was gone, and that was it. And I sort of, between that time period, probably from about 98, probably from about 98 until about 2002, I didn't really listen to Rush during that time. I don't know. I didn't, but I still had that Test for Echo poster on my wall. I remember that. But I didn't really listen to Rush in that time. I was sort of getting into other music. I was getting more into indie rock and more kind of older stuff and indie pop, and I was getting into the Beach Boys but they were, I always had the Rush stuff there, and but then I remember a friend of mine, close friend of mine, I was going through some shit. It was a weird, tough time for me those years. I was going through some shit. And I had stayed at this friend of mine's house. I stayed at her house for like a week in Dallas. And she was taking me back out to my mom's house. I was staying at my mom's house out in the sticks for a while. And she was taking me back out there. And I remember we got about halfway there. It's just crazy because those of you know my other work, about my stuff with Rockwall and all that. And I'll never forget, I remember we were in Rockwall. And we were listening to the radio. I remember they came on. I had not heard anything that Rush, anything about on the Rush front for many years at that point. Hadn't really even thought about them. And we hear on the radio tonight at Starplex, Rush, the Vapor Trails tour. And I was like, what the fuck? Rush is back. They got a new album. They're going to tour again. What the fuck? How come I didn't hear about this? And my friend, her and I aren't friends anymore, but her and I had this deal, man. She had this great thing with me where, like, she loved to go to concerts, and she would go to any concert I wanted to go to, even if it was bands that she wasn't really into, And she told me that one time. She's like, look, I'll make you a deal. She's like, I'll go to any concert with you that you want to go to because you're fucking great to go to concerts with. And I'll go to any concert you ever want to go to anytime, no matter who it is. And I'll pay for gas and I'll drive as long as you buy my ticket. And I was like, fucking deal. Done. Donezo. Not a fucking problem. Let's do this. And I remember I was in a real bad time at that time. I was real broke. And she'd already had me at her house put me up at her house for like a week and fed me. And all this stuff. And I remember we were about, halfway out to my mom's house right around Rockwall. And I was freaking out, oh my God, Rush is playing in Dallas now. What the fuck? And she just looks at me with a smile on her face. She's like, you want to go? I was like, don't fuck with me. She's like, I'm serious. I was like, I don't have it. I can't afford this. She's like, I'll pay. Do you want to go? She was like, I'll turn the car around right now and we will go. Do you want to go? And in retrospect, man, I wish I would have said yes. I didn't say yes because I just felt bad, dude. I just felt like such a bum at that time. I was just like, man, this girl's already put me up at her house for a week and fed me and took me around all these places. In retrospect, though, I wish I would have said yes. Got to admit, can't lie. Got to admit, I wish I would have said yes. But I didn't. And that ended up being the only tour besides what ended up being their last tour, the R40 tour in 2015. That's the one I don't regret missing the Vapor Trails one that much. I regret missing the R40 one because that shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened. I was just, I was in a bad situation at that time. I was living out farther away from out Dallas at that time. I wasn't doing very well financially. Not that I am now either, but 2015 was really kind of what started. That was when things started to get bad. A lot of stuff happened with I don't want to get into it, but a lot of stuff with like the stuff I was doing with the Rockwall and they had with all that disinfo stuff, and it hurt me. And so I wasn't doing as well. I just couldn't afford to go. And, I have to admit, I was a little salty. I'm not going to lie to you. I was a little salty. I'll take it back. I was a lot salty. I'm not going to lie. I was salty for a while. I was pretty salty for a while because, I just had felt like, because for a lot of years, I had taken so many of my friends, so many people to see Rush for so many years, so many shows. And I always paid for everybody's tickets and I always bought everybody, and I didn't have to do that. I could have gotten better seats for myself and went by myself and not bought tickets for other people and for my friends and stuff. But because I wanted them, I felt it was so important that they experience Rush. I made those sacrifices through the years at various shows. And, when Rush was saying, this probably will be our last tour, we're probably not going to tour again. And none of those people that I'd sacrificed and bought tickets for, none of those people could pay me back and come through for me that I'd bought tickets for, when I needed it the most. I would have been happy with the cheapest nosebleed seat there would have been, And nobody could come through for me. I couldn't get the money to go. Couldn't get anybody to loan me the money to go. I gotta admit, I was pretty fucking salty about it for a while. I'm over it now, but yeah, I'm over it now. Kinda. Nah, I am. But you know what? What really, I'm grateful I got to see him 9 times. I can't lie. I'm grateful I got to see him the 9 times I got to see him. I can remember sitting there. Just so many great memories, man. And look, I'm sorry that this show is long-winded, but I warned you it's going to be long. It's not going to be something that's going to happen quick. This is going to be a long show. So, again, dig in with it, But I can remember, God, man, when I was in like middle school and high school, you remember the whole video store days. And, if you got to the video store late on Friday night or Saturday night, all the new shit, all the good shit was gone. And that's what I called Netflix for a long time. Netflix for a long time, it's gotten better now, but for a long time, Netflix was like the video store when you got there too late. That's pretty much what all of Netflix was for a while. Kind of still is in some ways. But anyway, the video store I used to go to when I was in, middle school, high school, that kind of thing. They always had the two things they always had, and I can't tell you how many weekends, man. Being friends, we did have the same situation. I don't know why. But you know how it is. You're doing kid stuff back then, or they're just going to the football game on Friday night or whatever. So you're going to the video store, you're getting there late before they close. Everybody's already gotten all the new releases, all the new shit's gone. You're like, well, what are we going to get? We got to get something. We're going to be fucking slumber partying or whatever all weekend. We got some shit to watch, and we'd always end up getting just standbys, And one of the things that they had is this particular video store. I never saw this anywhere else. I wanted my own copy but it was pretty rare because they'd probably had it since the video store probably had this since it came out in 1984 or whatever. But they had the Rush Grace Under Pressure tour home video, which was a live concert from the Grace Under Pressure tour filmed in Toronto. And they'd always have the Blues Brothers. I can't tell you how many times on the weekends we ended up with either would even be like the Blues Brothers or like the first Highlander movie, and that Rush Grace Under Pressure tour video. Can't have too many times I watched it, and then later I got the Rush A Show of Hands VHS. Man, I remember when I had my first apartment when I was probably 20 years old. I had my first little one-bedroom apartment. And I used to have this, I had this like big, like, it was like 100-watt PV bass amp. And this is in the days before, surround sound systems and all that. And I remember I used to jerry-rig this fucking, went to Radio Shack and got a bunch of cables and adapters and shit. And so I ran like the audio outputs into RCA jacks, stereo output jacks out of the back of the VCR into a 1/4-inch guitar plug. I'd run that out of the back of the VCR and run it into the front of that 100-watt PV amplifier. And people would come over and they'd be like, oh, fucking Rush. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And I, no. Look, watch this. I was like, just watch this video. All right. And if you still hate them, and you still want to hate on me for liking them at the end of this, fine. But I want you to watch this. And I want you to listen to this. And I'd put in that Rush A Show of Hands VHS, and I'd crank that fucking 100-watt PV amp up with my fucking plug rig on it. It would blow your brains out. I mean, it was like concert sound, dude. It sounded like they were playing in the fucking room with you. And again, this is before surround sound systems and all, and all that, and HD. Man, I can't tell you how many times I turned people around with that, where they were, not really Rush fans. And then next time they came over, hey man, can we watch that Rush video again? Every time they come over, hey man, where's that Rush video at? Like, oh, I did that to so many people, so many friends, man. It was so awesome to see that, to see that transformation happen in people like that. But, yeah, after Vapor Trails came out, that was when I started getting back into Rush again. And I wasn't even particularly that big of a fan of the Vapor Trails album for a long time, but they, in recent years, they did I think it's called Vapor Trails Revisited. I like the songs. I just never liked the sound of the record because it sounds like a demo recording. And it is. The original one was basically a demo recording. I don't know why they did it like that. That's the thing, man. As much as I love Rush, they were never the same after they came back. They just weren't. They were not the same band that they were at the end of that Test for Echo tour when they came back. And understandably, I mean, with Neil, losing his family and all the stuff that he went through and them not knowing if they were ever going to come back again, it was a tough go. But I liked the Vapor Trails album, especially if you get a chance to hear the revisited, remixed version that they did. I was so glad they did that because you could hear that it was a good record. The songs were good. it was just, I couldn't listen to it because it just was so poorly recorded. It hurt my ears to listen to it. It was fatiguing. The frequencies in that record were just not right. Boy, they sure fixed it, though. They sure fixed it. And the revisited version that they did of Vapor Trails is like, you hear it and you're like, oh my God. You're like, this is what it was supposed to be. And then 2004, they had the 30th anniversary tour. And by this time, my brother and my sister had gotten older, and I'd told them for years, one day, man. And I didn't even know if Rush would even still be around because they weren't around for so many years. It's like, one day I'm going to fucking take you guys to see Rush. And then 2004 rolled around, and they came with the 30th anniversary tour. And I was able to do that. And then, my brother and my sister became Rush fans, and they're Rush fans to this day. And that's the spirit of Rush is, turning other people onto it and eating other people onto it. And listen, I'm happy. I really am glad that they finally gotten their just desserts and they finally gotten the recognition they deserve. I really am. But I have to admit, at the same time, I do miss the days of when it was kind of our little secret, when being a Rush fan really meant something, when it literally was like a secret society. It literally was like a secret society of Rush fans. And if you happen to finally, which rarely ever happened, but it did happen to me a few times, man, if you happen to meet or come across somebody or an acquaintance or something, and you found out they were a Rush fan too, man, it was like, it didn't matter what else you had in common. It didn't matter. You were instantly friends for life. Instantly, you were bonded together through Rush. Instantly, it was like, you had been looking for them just as long as they had been looking for you. I remember a friend that I had one time, and we'd been hanging out with a beer drinking buddy. He was just like a beer drinking buddy of some other beer drinking buddies. And I don't remember what it was. So we were somewhere one night getting plowed, and somebody said something, and I responded with something from a Rush lyric, and nobody else got it except him. And I just remember him laughing, going, "Josh, that's why I like you, man." He's like, he couldn't believe it was some obscure song. He's like, "I can't fucking believe you do that song." I'm like, "Hell yeah, dude. Holy Trinity, what are you talking about?" But that's how it was. It's not as special as it used to be. There's so many people that are Rush fans now. And a lot of these, like, man, there's people like Billy Corgan and stuff now. They all act like, oh, they've always been the biggest Rush fans. Dude, I can tell you, Billy Corgan was when people would ask him back in the 90s what his influences were, he was not saying fucking Rush. Now, he tells the story that the whole inspiration behind the first album, Gish, was him and Jimmy Chamberlain were both Rush nuts, and they were listening to Rush and doing acid, and that's what inspired them to make the first album. But he wouldn't tell that story. See, he didn't start telling that story until a few years ago. Because even the big rock stars were ashamed to admit. When Metallica was coming out with the Black Album and selling millions of copies, were those guys talking about what big Rush fans were? Fuck no, they weren't. Neil dies, and now they're all, oh, he's the greatest drummer. And all these people, I'm like, man, y'all a bunch of hypocrites. I mean, I'm not going to talk shit on them too bad. I'm happy to see they're getting the credit they deserve and whatnot. But man, where the fuck were y'all back in the slim? Where were y'all back in the 90s, man? Nobody wanted to admit they were a Rush fan back then. Then, after they made their comeback, and the documentary came out in 2010, and then Stephen Colbert had them on, and they got inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then all of a sudden it became cool to be a Rush fan, and they're getting talked about. They were on the cover of Rolling Stone. Like, what? Rolling Stone would have never have put them on the cover in the 70s, the 80s, or the 90s. So, again, I don't want to be too precious about it, but I mean, I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad they finally got the credit they deserve, because they do deserve it. But at the same time, man, it meant something back then. Especially what I've never seen, and the concerts changed too. I really noticed the change in the concerts probably right around the time of, I get maybe it was right after it would have been right after the 30th anniversary tour, which was an awesome tour. That was one of my favorite tours. Right around the time I guess they came out with the Snakes and Arrows album, which is a fantastic album. I love that. It's probably one of my favorites of their later period albums. It was right, I think it was about that tour, Snakes and Arrows tour, where I noticed a big shift in the audiences, where you had a lot more people who didn't know all the songs. Where it was like the first few Rush shows I went to, everybody there knew every single song and was into every single song. Well, maybe I guess it was maybe before that. I couldn't remember it. I remember the 30th anniversary tour when they did the song Bravado off of Roll the Bones. And I remember I had floor seats. My brother had floor seats, and my sister was on the lawn. And I remember when it got to that song, kind of a slower song, everybody sat down. The whole place sat down. Oh, not me, Jack. I ain't sitting down. You got paid all this money to sit down? Fuck you. I couldn't believe that. It was the first time I've ever seen people sit down at a Rush show. I was like, what's going on here? I remember my sister going, man, I looked up there, I looked way in the back, and I could see the whole fucking crowd sitting down, except I saw one guy. I thought all you can see is through the whole crowd, you can just see one guy standing up. That one guy was me. So yeah, I started to see a big shift, and then an even bigger shift around the Snakes and Arrows tour, where where people are waiting, where people would wait to hear Tom Sawyer, and then when they played Tom Sawyer, you saw people heading towards the door. And I remember going, what the fuck? So you never would have seen that happen before. But by that time, Classic Rock Radio had played them more. They were getting more press. And, they were reaching a wider audience, but yeah, it was just a different time. It was a different thing, They were, it was just weird that there was that shift. And all of a sudden it became okay and it became accepted, It does make me a little mad though when I see people acting like they've, been into them forever, but the death of Neil has been a shocking thing for a lot of people. Even for me, and I can't lie to you, I knew it was coming. I mean, I did. I knew it was coming, and even still, it hit me just as hard. I knew something was up. I knew something was up in 2015 because they never, they didn't call it the farewell tour. People now subsequently have I've seen in interviews and stuff, calling that the farewell tour. They didn't call it that at the time. It was just supposed to be the 40th anniversary tour. And they started to hint in the press that this might be the last go. That this might be the last tour. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really think much of it. Because I'd been a Rush fan for so long, and I had been keeping up with their interviews and all that stuff for so long. Dude, you can go back and listen to interviews from the Presto tour. I was listening to one the other night. There's interviews from the Presto tour, 1990, where Neil's talking about, well, we didn't know, we really didn't want to tour anymore. We kind of had decided that the Hold Your Fire tour was going to be our last tour, and we weren't going to tour anymore. I mean, they had been talking about we're not going to tour anymore for 20 years. They really had. And every time they would change that, and I even remember, you can go and watch that the documentary from the Rush and Rio DVD, the Boys in Brazil documentary from that. And that was their comeback. And even in the documentary, the interview that with Neil, he says in there, well, we decided we'd, fire it up and go do it, one last time or whatever. So it wasn't a shock to me. I just figured they were doing that as a sell point, and they take a few years off, and then they'd come back, and then, stuff started coming out that they were done. Stuff started coming out that Neil didn't even have drums in his house anymore, which was a big shock. And then shortly after the tour ended in 2015, news came out that Anthem Entertainment, which was their management company that Rush started with their manager, and that they had folded Anthem Entertainment, or they'd sold it off, and then that they had sold the rights. Not only did they close up their management, which, ran all the machinery and everything for Rush, but Rush collectively and the individual members of the band sold the rights of their music to the Universal Music Conglomerate, meaning they no longer had ownership over their catalog, over their songs or anything. They took a lump sum. Of course, those kind of deals revert back to it's like a thing. A lot of artists are doing that these days. It's not uncommon. I know that the guys from Twisted Sister did that. Basically, what it does is a lot of guys are doing it in their old age. Instead of you getting every year or have quarterly or whatever, you getting royalty checks come in from your sales of your catalog and all that stuff. What they do instead is they pay you one gigantic lump sum, especially for a band like Twisted Sister or Rush or somebody, with these big catalogs. And instead of getting your, quarterly or whatever, or yearly royalty checks trickling in, you get a gigantic sum of money up front, and they get the rights to your music for, however long, 10 years, however it might be. And then after the end of that period, the rights revert back to the band members. And if, there happens to be now, like there is now in the case of Neil, that money reverts back to their estate if a band member passes away during that time. So that was a red flag for me. Okay, they don't want to tour anymore. Because all they said at first was, Neil doesn't want to tour anymore. He's got tendinitis. He wants to spend time with his young daughter. Okay, we get it. He's been on the road all these years. He doesn't want to tour anymore. That's it. And then stuff started coming out. He doesn't have any drums anymore. Like, he's erased drums from his life. They sold off the rights to their catalog. All these red flags started coming out. There was a picture that came out where he was a year or two ago, where he went and I forget what they call it, some kind of club, the Catalina Club or something. And he was going to like the Catalina. He was like one of the few people who going to visit all the Catalina Islands. Certain ones you can only visit with like Navy SEAL escorts. This is not the conspiratorial show, so I'm not going to get too much into that. But if you've done any research, do some research into the Catalina Islands off the coast of California, there's a reason why you have to go there with Navy SEAL escorts and stuff. There's supposedly secret underground UFO bases out there. There's some top secret stuff out there. And I don't know, it seemed like he was just he wasn't at home spending time with his daughter, like everybody said. He was out doing bucket list type shit. And he started to look different. Listen, I've been around enough people in my life with cancer to know what, to know what that looks like, to know what that, that chemo red, look, and man, I've seen it. I've seen it a lot in my life, more times. I've seen it more times in my life than I ever want to again, man. It's rough. There's nothing, there is nothing worse. There's nothing worse than watching somebody just wither away from cancer, man. It's the fucking worst thing. Especially somebody you love. There's nothing worse than that. And towards the end of 2018, there was a photo that came out, was circulating on the internet with Kevin the Caveman Shirley, the producer great producer. He's the guy that produced the Counterparts record. And he's the guy that was really, when he made the Counterparts record, he was bound and determined to, as I mentioned earlier, how some of those later records from like Hold Your Fire, Presto, Roll the Bones, I like those records. They got good songs on them. But they kind of had a very thin digital, that was really when digital recordings were first started coming in. In fact, Rush was one of the first bands to adopt digital recording. A lot of people may not know that. But their first all digital album was actually Power Windows. Was that like 85? So all those records from Power Windows on were all digitally recorded records. That's why they sort of had that sort of a thin sound to them, It's not a bad sound. In fact, the old digital recording, I think, is actually better than some of the newer stuff. Because back then the technology was new, and a lot of it was still incorporating analog tape, but it was recording digitally onto analog tape. And these big, like $100,000 Sony machines that actually had a tape in it, but it would encode the data onto an analog tape digitally. A lot of records from that period of the 80s into the early 90s were made with those machines. But when Kevin the Caveman Shirley came on, he wanted to go. He's an analog guy, so he's like, we're recording this on tape. Alex, you're not fucking using rack mount guitar shit. We're going straight fucking guitar into pedals or into fucking tube amps. Getty, you're not using fucking synthesizers. You're not using the fucking wall bass or the headless Steinberger. You're going back to the fucking Fender Precision bass or jazz bass from the old days. We're plugging those motherfuckers right into the front of Ampeg tube amplifiers, recording this shit right off the floor live, and then we'll overdub everything else later, And that's what gave that record that sound, it was heavy again. Rush was heavy. That was what Counterparts was everybody was saying they were making a grunge record. They weren't making a grunge record. They were just returning to a heavier sound again. So at the end of 2018, a picture started circulating on the internet of Kevin the Caveman Shirley, Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and Neil at Neil's house in front of Neil's various collection of Aston Martin automobiles, all silver. And they're all big smiles. Geddy and Alex, big smiles. Neil, big smile. Kevin the Caveman Shirley, big smile. Neil with his hand on Alex's shoulder, and Geddy on his shoulder. And I think I was in denial. I saw this picture and I went, fuck. I knew it. I was like, I don't think he has long. And I think I was in denial. I think a lot of fans were probably in denial. I certainly didn't go around saying Neil Peart's about to die. But I've seen people. I've seen what they look like, man, when they're close. And they were also. I looked at that picture today, and I definitely could tell. Yeah, I think they probably thought this was the last time they'd all be together, and they wanted to make it happy, But he kept it a secret, man. He kept it a secret all the time. They said it was 3.5 years. I don't know. I think it was longer than that. I'm not going to get into any conspiratorial stuff. If you try to fucking bring conspiratorial stuff into this and leave comments about that on the show, you're going to get your comments deleted. This is not the show for that. I looked into the type of cancer that he had, glioblastoma, I think is what they call it. It's actually a rare form of brain cancer, brain tumors that only affects 1 in 200,000 people. I don't think there was anything conspiratorial about his death at all, honestly. Well, it depends on what your definition of conspiratorial is. Some people consider eugenics conspiratorial, but eugenics is actually a real thing. I mean, CNN, even fucking CNN, not necessarily the bastion of truth, right? Had a story, I don't know, 10 years or so ago. Hitler and the Nazis were known for eugenics, right? Well, guess where Hitler and the Nazis got all of their eugenics ideas from? They got them from the state of California. That's a fact. You can look that up. The state of California was doing eugenic stuff, depopulation stuff, population control stuff, putting stuff in water, in vaccines and stuff like that. And the Nazis took that and said, "Oh, well, those are great ideas." I was shocked when I saw that report, because I knew about eugenics at that point, but seeing them report that on CNN, it was just like mind-blowing. But if you look into the glioblastoma and you go look up the cause of that, there's a specific, it's a, what is it? Is it a cell or a germ, or I can't remember exactly what it is. From a lot of people from that, of Neil's age and people of that generation and my dad's age too had got polio vaccines. I remember my dad had that scar on his arm from the polio vaccine. And this is a fact. You can look it up. This is not a conspiracy. The polio vaccine had a virus in it that stays dormant in the body until people reach about their 60s, and then it becomes active, and that's one of the causes they believe. They don't know for sure. I believe 100% that's the cause. They claim not to know for sure because they don't want to admit to guilt. But and my sister said that Joni Mitchell talked about that in her book, and that Joni Mitchell, I think, believes that some of her health ailments and stuff were caused by that as well. But it's basically like a eugenics thing. But that specific type of glioblastoma that Neil died from was absolutely caused by, and they don't give those polio vaccines anymore, but Neil was one of those from that generation that had that. So, a very private guy. He's a very private guy. He didn't like attention. He didn't like people telling him he was the greatest drummer in the world. It embarrassed him. He didn't like all the attention of being a rock star and adulation. He hated it. He absolutely hated it, and he ran from it at every chance he got. And that, that well-known line in the song Limelight, 100% was not just him, writing a song. I Can't Pretend a Stranger Is a Long-Awaited Friend. 100% was that summed up Neil. He didn't want the limelight. He just wanted to be the best he could be. And he didn't want adulation or attention for it, That's why he didn't do meet and greets. He didn't like to sign autographs. And that's why I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I've got I look at it every day because it's my greatest piece of memorabilia, man. I've got my Signals album up there and framed on my wall. A lot of people have Geddy Lee or Alex Lifeson's autographs or both, but very few people have all three together. And I've got all three together. And not only do I have all three together, it's personally addressed to me, to Josh, from Neil. And, man, I'll treasure that always. I better be buried with that fucking thing. God's sakes. I'll tell you how I got that. From the very early days of the internet. I'm talking back when you had to go to the library to get on, before I could afford my own computer. I got my first computer that I built myself from parts in 2000. It was like a Pentium 2 or something like that. I built it from parts for not very much money. And that was a machine I used for many years. Did my first home recordings on that box, and did a lot of my early research into the sort of the conspiratory fields. But also, I was heavily involved from about 99 to about 2013. I think about 2013 was about when I stopped. I, for the longest time, was heavily involved in the Rush message boards. And what a lot of people didn't know is that the members of Rush would monitor themselves. They would personally monitor those message boards. And they would be in there, they would go in there and they would read the fan messages on the regular. And they would make decisions. In fact, I personally affected a decision that they made on their Clockwork Angels tour. Because the first couple of shows, and the set list came out, the first couple of shows, they weren't playing the song Spirit of the Radio. And I was about to say this earlier and got onto something else, but when I was talking earlier about, turning people on to that home video, through the amplifier and all that, I can remember when I first saw even before that, when I was talking about going to the video store as a teenager and stuff and renting that Grace Under Pressure video and watching that. I can remember being 16 years old and watching that and dreaming, going, man, I know it'll never happen. I know it's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen in a gazillion million fucking years. But my dream is that one day Rush will come to Dallas and play a concert, and they'll film a concert video in Dallas, and I'll be there and be able to be, at the concert, watching the concert, and then we'll have the video for posterity forever, and I'll be able to say I was there when they filmed it. And I never thought it would happen, and it did. It did, and it ended up being the last time I got to see Rush in 2012 on the Clockwork Angels tour. And this has to do with me getting the signed record. I had known for a long time. that they had monitored the message boards, and that sometimes they would even Alex would sometimes even comment. He'd have like a fake sign in or something. He would sometimes come in there and stir the pot up and like kind of get arguments going with people, and no one would ever know it was him. And I'd kind of figured out what his fake screen name was, but I never blew him up or anything. I never told anybody. But I remember leaving this comment saying, because at that time they had announced they were going to come to Dallas and stuff. And I remember I said, hey, the guys from Rush, I hear some of you guys, check out these message boards. If you do, please pay attention to what I have to say right here. You have to put in, can you believe they cut the Spirit of Radio from the set list? It's like, you absolutely have to put Spirit of Radio back in the set list before you come to Dallas and film your video. Because the last time I saw you guys on the Time Machine tour in 2010, I did something I never really did before at a Rush show. Normally you're into it and you're into the moment. You're looking at the stage, you're looking at the band, you're cheering. And I remember during that show, I don't know, for whatever reason, something told me to look back, and I looked back. I had pretty good seats at that show. I remember looking back at, and everybody's got their hands in the air. Invisible airwaves crackle with life, bright antenna bristle with the energy. and everybody's clapping. And God, that place was electric. It was electric. The hair is standing up. I got goosebumps now just talking about it. That place. Unlike any other Rush show, it's just that moment at that show on that Time Machine tour in Dallas during Spirit of the Road, it was electric. You could feel the entire crowd was in unison with the band. It was so, you could feel the energy, and it was an unbelievable moment. And I said that, I said, like, when you guys played that last time, it's like I looked back, which I'd never done before, and the place was electric. The entire place was on its feet. Everyone was clapping. You could feel the energy from everyone around you, and for that to not be captured, on this video, it would be a travesty, not just for the fans, but for people watching it in the future. And the very next show, they fucking put Spirit of the Radio back into the fucking set list. The very next show. And I remember people all in the chat were going, dude, you did that. You fucking did that. Dude, you did that. You fucking did that. They had not played it for almost the entire tour. And then, boom, after I left that comment, boom, very next show, that sumbitch was back in the set list where it remained. And when I was a kid, I used to send baseball cards and football cards. I figured out this thing where you could, if you sent like a self-addressed stamped envelope to like your favorite players, you could send it in. And as long as you had the return posted on them, they would sign your like cards and send them back to you. And I'd been involved in the, in the group for a long time. And there was one person in there. I knew he worked for the band in some capacity, but I didn't know who it was or how or anything like that. He oftentimes would come in and into the message boards and talk and stuff. I later found out it was Liam Burt. Liam Burt was Rush's, he had a variety capacities for the band, last of which was their tour manager. But that's the thing with Rush, man. A lot of the people that worked with them, their crew and stuff, they had a lot of the same crew through their entire career. They were so good to the people that they employed that the people that they employed didn't quit. And you got moved up in the company. I mean, Liam Burt started out doing carpentry and shit, helping build the stages in the 70s. He moved up the organization and became the tour manager. Howard Underlyer, he's in they talk about him in the 2010 documentary. He was kind of like their kind of tour manager guy. He then later moved up and became the head of lighting, the lighting director to all the big lighting rigs and shit that they did. A lot of the people that worked with him, they were so good to everybody that they came across, and everybody that worked on them, people would work for them for decades and never quit. And that's why so many of the people that worked for them were so sad when they decided not to tour anymore, because it wasn't just the end of touring and just the end of that element, for the fans and for the band, but for these road people that had been on the road together literally since the 70s. Man, that was their whole lives. That was their employment. That was, and then they could all easily go get jobs, but Liam Burt I found out was in the chat rooms or in the message boards and stuff. And there was a discussion about Geddy being into baseball. Geddy Lee's a huge baseball fan, if you didn't know that. And talk got on about, sending, how you could send, hey, somebody else used to do the same thing I did when I was a kid, where you could send in cards, to your favorite player or something, put a self-addressed stamped envelope in there. And they would sometimes, not all the time, but, sometimes you got lucky. I got pretty lucky when I was a kid. I got Michael Jordan. God, I wish I still had that. I had Michael Jordan signed card, a bunch of people. But Liam Burt, which nobody knew was Liam Burt at the time, was in the message boards, and he was like, don't quote me on this. I don't want to, don't quote me on this, but I heard from a reliable source that if you send a record sleeve or, a CD cover or something like that, don't send a bunch of things, just send one thing to get signed. And you put a nice little personalized, letter in there to the band, and you include the return postage and the envelope and all that Rush will sign your stuff and send it back to you. And by the way, when you send it, make sure you address it to Liam Burt. That was how I knew it was him. And then I figured, oh, okay. Yeah, little birdie told you, huh? And later it came out that was him. And so when they were coming to town to shoot the Clockwork Angels tour, and I was going to that show, everybody was saying, well, try this at your own risk. There's no guarantee. You might, because there was one person that said they had success. A few other people that said they didn't get jack shit back. They didn't get anything. So they were like, just make sure whatever you send that you're okay with losing it in case you don't get it back. So I went on to like eBay or something and got like a cheap copy of Signals on vinyl for $5 or something. And this was in 2012 was when that tour was. And this was after my dad passed away and stuff. And so I wrote this letter to like they said, I wrote a letter to the band, and I said, I'll make it short because I know you guys could probably get a bunch of these. And I didn't really intend for it to be, I really intended it for it to be more to the entire band. But looking back, it really ended up being more directly towards Neil. And as I said earlier, man, just philosophy-wise, individualism. People talk about punk rock, and no, man, I learned more about individualism and freedom, libertarianism, and that whole thing from Neil than I ever learned from punk rock and nonconformism. Fuck all that. Man, punk rock was not nonconformism. It was a uniform, and it was just conformity wrapped in a different wrapping paper. Because it still became its own uniform and its own thing, and it had its own boundaries and restrictions on it. That's not nonconformity. That's not going against the system. So I just wrote this short and sweet and, very direct thing and said, look, I'll just get right to the point. I wouldn't be alive. I would not be alive today if it was not for your music. That's a fact. Your music has got me through the toughest times in my life when I was destitute and I was, my worst. I was beyond rock bottom. And I would listen to those lyrics with that great music behind it. And so many times, man, when I was on my last leg, when I, didn't know if I could go on, it would pull me out of it. And I told him about, my dad passing away and that, and being, being upset and going through all that. And I told him, I said, and I referenced what he went through with his daughter and his wife. And I said, one thing I've always heard Neil say, is that we're not smarter than you. If we can figure this stuff out, you can figure it out too. And I just told myself, hey, if Neil made it through what he made it through, I can make it through this stuff too. And I talked about, because, I was very aware of him not liking compliments and not wanting to meet fans and all that. And he had this, I can't remember the name of it. I've got it over there. Damn it. I'll have to tell you later. I've got a video. Around that time I had gotten whether you know this or not, I'm also a musician. And, but I play guitar and I play bass, I play keyboards, and Rush was really my inspiration for wanting to learn how to play all those different instruments. And that was one of the things I said to Neil was, I said, thank you, Neil. And this is exact words I used. I said, thank you for demystifying yourself. Because that's exactly what it was for me. And I knew he'd like that big word. I said, thank you for demystifying yourself in that video, that drumming video. Because, when you watch Neil and you watch what he does and you listen to what he does, you're like, Jesus Christ, has he got 6 arms. And what you realize is that, yes, as incredible of a drummer as he was, really just came down to being able to afford a drum kit where you had that many things to hit. Because his drum kit was 3 drum kits in one. Literally, it was 2 analog kits with 2 kick drums, 2 sets of toms, and then 2 floor toms on the side, and what would have been the 3rd floor tom from the other kit set on the left side of the kit over on the other side where the snare is, and then an electronic kit around the back. And I remember when I got that, one of his instructional videos, most instructional videos, they're crap. It's just these wanker players. I remember I got the Brian May instructional video when I was a teenager, and it was just Brian May going, okay, I'm going to play it once the regular speed, and then I'm going to play it once slow. Okay, got it? All right, next. I was like, what? Like, he didn't teach you anything. It was just him shredding and expecting you to learn how to do what he's doing by watching him play it slow. It was bullshit. Whereas with this Neil one, they had overhead shots and everything, and I never really watched a drum instructional video. I got this awesome Neil one because it's enjoyable even if you're not a drummer. It really is. You don't even have to be a drummer to enjoy his instructional videos. They're that good because it's him talking, and he's very intelligent. But for the first time when I watched that instructional video, I could watch him do something. I could go into the drum room. I could go into my room where my drums are set up at, and I could execute. I could do it. And it was mind-blowing for me. I was like, he's not a god. He's not an alien. He's a man just like you and me. And in that video, he really showed that. And it came across to me, man. I go, he did not have to do this. He did not have to make this video. He could have just as easily went along with his life, letting people think that he's some sort of multi-limbed god magician on the drums, but he didn't do that. He didn't do that. Instead, he made a video where he demystified himself for you and shows you, hey, you're no different than me and I'm no different than you. We're the same. If I can learn how to do this, you can do this too. And I, as much respect as I already had for the guy from his, fantastic lyrics, and that's the thing that maybe I think gets lost. Everybody knows what a fantastic drummer he is, but it gets lost at what an incredible lyricist. In my opinion, the greatest rock lyricist of all time. Not just the greatest rock drummer of all time, the greatest rock lyricist that ever lived. Fuck Dylan. Fuck the Beatles. I've learned more applicable life lessons from Neil Elwood Peart than I have from anyone else. And God bless Geddy Lee, man. I mean, it's, listen, you cannot underestimate how special of a talent it is for someone to take those kind of heady words like that Neil would write, and to be able to translate them, not only translate them, because Geddy and Alex wrote all the music. Neil never wrote any music. He was words only and the drum parts. That's it. Geddy and Alex, God bless them, had to come up with all that great music on their own to match those fantastic lyrics. It's not like Neil had a melody in his head when he wrote that lyrics and said, okay, this is the melody for this song, play this song. No, he would just give them lyrics, and they had to somehow figure out how to make all that great music to go along with those lyrics. And not only to go along with those lyrics, but then to also for Geddy to figure out, it's very difficult, to sing, to put convincing emotion behind lyrics that you didn't write. And Geddy could deliver those lyrics in a way where you wouldn't even have, if you didn't know better, you wouldn't even know he didn't write it. A lot of people always assumed Geddy wrote all those lyrics. He didn't. He wrote all the lyrics on the first album, which Neil wasn't on, and he wrote Tears on the B-side of 2112, and that's it. That's it. So that ability to be able to take those, the heady words and not only come up with music and shoehorn music to them, but to sing them in a way with emotion that is convincing. It's like a magic trick. It's so special. And Alex is a guitar player. I think he's so underrated as a guitar player because he gets more credit now than he used to, but you never used to see him appear on those like top guitarist things. And that's the other thing, to be able to come up with guitar parts for some of those songs like that is incredible. And, people often, like I said before, shit talk the 80s synthesizer era. And even Alex himself has talked about how it was difficult during that period for him to be able to figure out how to fit into the frequency spectrum that the keyboards were taking up so much space with. And I hear him say that, and then I listen to those records, and I go, Alex, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Dude, are you kidding? So he did some of his best guitar playing during that time period because it's so difficult to be able to figure out how to get guitar and make a guitar work in the framework of heavy synthesizers like that and stuff. And listen, the synthesizer period didn't start in the 80s. People always say, I didn't like the 80s Rush. Too many synthesizers. Listen, the fucking Rush synthesizer period started in 76 with 2112, you dolts. Fuck out of here, you fucking bandwagon fans. Fuck out of here. The Rush synthesizer era started in 1976 with 2112. The opening swish on 2112. It's an ARP synthesizer. The song Tears on there, that's a fucking Mellotron. Then after that, you had Farewell to Kings. Farewell to Kings had Mini Moog, and then he got into the later he got into the Oberheims. He had the Oberheim 4 voice first, and he got the Oberheim 8 voice. There's a picture, if you type Geddy Lee synthesizer, there's a picture of him standing. For many years, I didn't know what this was. It's this big monstrosity thing. It's from the late 70s era. Geddy's got the long hair. A lot of those Oberheim synthesizers were modular synthesizers, so you could add parts to them, take them away, you can add different modules to them and build them up and make them have more sounds. And this particular Oberheim 8 voice, he had like the full 8 voices in it, but he had the top part where you would add more parts of it ripped out. And I didn't know for the longest time what this keyboard was till I finally figured out what he had done with it. And he put the Mini Moog inside of the Oberheim. So before they had MIDI, you could do something they call CV gate, which is like a precursor to MIDI, where it's a way to control other analog synthesizers and use them in conjunction with other ones that you have. So, like the intro, that Tom Sawyer, everybody always attributes that to the Moog Taurus pedals because they use the Moog Taurus pedals judiciously for many years. It actually is not. That sound is not actually produced by the Moog Taurus pedals. Everybody and their mother always associates that with the Moog Taurus pedals. It's actually not the Moog Taurus. You cannot get Moog Taurus pedals to make that filtering sound like that. What it is it's a Moog Taurus pedal that is CV gated into the Oberheim 8 voice. Then it's using the filter from the Oberheim 8 voice and then hitting the low register note on the Moog Taurus pedal and then trigger through the CV gate and coming out the other end. That's what's making that where you hear it. That's the sound of the filter or the octave going on the filter. The Moog Taurus pedals won't do that on their own. That was something Geddy came up with entirely on his own. And again, this was all during the 1970s. The synthesizer period started in 76. And every time the synthesizers developed, they were developing a lot through the years. all the way through Permanent Waves, all that. Geddy was updating all that stuff, and they were one of the first bands to incorporate MIDI. They were the first to, and they would do it. God, they were fucking MIDI masters, dude. And everybody, not just Geddy, was triggering MIDI stuff. Neil was triggering MIDI stuff. Alex was triggering MIDI stuff. They had guitar parts, extra guitar parts. They had to figure out a way to be able to recreate their songs live on stage and do it with only the three people in the band, the Holy Trinity, and not add other people. And they did it long before anybody else. They were using samplers and triggers and gates and all that stuff long before anybody else was doing it. In fact, there's if you hear the song "Roll the Bones," there's an organ part on it that goes right before that part. It goes and at the end it does that. It's it sounds like a almost like a B3 organ part or something. Well, that's not Geddy. Geddy's too busy. He's already tied up doing something else. Alex is tied up doing something else. But it's right before it goes, because we're here. And it goes, and you hear that sort of little organ part. If you watch in the live shows, that synthesizer part is being triggered by Neil. So it's on a program somewhere on a sampler. Geddy's busy over here doing something else. He can't get to the keyboard to play that, so he plays it. They record it onto a sampler, and then Neil triggers it with a drum thing. Same thing with Alex. There are keyboard parts like that. There are certain keyboard parts where Geddy's busy. He's playing some bass rhythm part over here, and he can't get to it. Neil's got a little break in the guitar, so he can go over. He can click a foot switch, and boom, that triggers a sequencer, and then you'll hear a sequencer track thing come in. I mean, they were just geniuses at being able to figure out how to trigger all these different sounds from the records and the recordings. Backing vocals too. Geddy would do where it sounded like he would have backing vocals and they would be on a foot pedal. And when it got to that part of the song, he would click the Moog foot pedal that they had on a MIDI signal, and it would trigger the vocal. And then he would it would sound like, when you record in the studio, you double track your voice and you could sing one octave and then sing another octave higher. So Geddy would hit that part when it got to that part. So you have to be so precise to be able to do this. It would get to that part of the song, and maybe he would hit it, or maybe Alex would trigger it. Maybe Alex would trigger a vocal part, and then he would trigger it, and then Geddy would sing an octave higher, and then it would sound like it was him singing twice, like there was two of them. Just genius shit like that. But back to what I was saying with, my point of all this was talking to Neil, in that letter and saying, thank you for demystifying yourself. I know he doesn't like comments, but I was saying, look, I just wanted to tell him all the things that you saved my life. I wouldn't be here without you. I wouldn't be the person I am today, philosophy-wise. Thank you for demystifying yourself. Everybody always thinks that you're some kind of alien and not human, and you made that drum video where anybody like me can go into the drum room, watch that video, and if for the first time in my life I could go in there and play something that you just played. But if you hadn't shown me in that video how to do it, I would have never figured it out. And you didn't have to do that. You could be precious about being considered, and be egotistical about being considered the greatest in the world, the greatest drummer on earth. But instead of that, Neil said, no, you know what? No. I want people to know how to do this. I mean, because he's right. What good is it to be the best at something if you can't share that with the world and you're precious about it and you're stingy with it? Doesn't make any sense. So anyway, that was I made it short. That was pretty much what I, said in my letter. And I just made it short and sweet and said all things to him without being, I knew what he likes and what he didn't like. I wasn't, oh my God, fawning over him. Oh, you're the greatest of all time, Peart. Oh, such a huge fan. I wasn't like that. It was just like, to the point, I wouldn't fucking be here if it wasn't for you. Thank you for fucking demystifying yourself. Thank you for making me realize that we're all the same, and you're not higher than me or anybody else. And anything you can do, I can do. And you're a great human being, and just fucking thanks. Whatever, what I said. And, I guess after I had left to go, so I sent that to American Airlines Center. I sent it like the day before the show. Put my return envelope in there and the return postage and all that, and address it to Liam Burt. And I guess I had left early that day to go to the show or something. I think where I lived at the time, the mail would run real late sometimes. Sometimes they wouldn't even deliver the mail till like 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes. And I remember when we pulled back up in the driveway after we left American Airlines Center and the show was over. Great show, and they filmed it for the concert thing. I got filmed. I did get filmed for the DVD. Didn't make the cut. I wasn't actually in the Blu-ray when it came out, but hey, that's okay. But it was a great show, and they played with the string section that tour. Unbelievable. I mean, it was awesome to hear the songs they did for Clockwork Angel with the string section, but dude, to hear YYZ with a fucking string section was unbelievable. And I remember we pulled up in the driveway after we got home from the show that night, and I guess it was too big to fit in the mailbox or whatever, and kind of sitting underneath by the mailbox, I saw my fucking package thing that I had sent them to get autographed, And I was like, fuck. I guess they fucking returned it or didn't deliver it or whatever, because I didn't think I'd get it back that quick. And I opened it up, man, and there it was. Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and then on the first part of it, signed to Josh, Neil Peart. He and I know for a fact that because I've seen other autographs and stuff, I've never seen other ones where he has addressed it to other people. I've looked. A lot of people get Geddy and Alex. It's a rarity. I can tell you, I've looked extensively. It's a rarity. I really had an impact on him with my letter. I really did. Because he took the extra time and motivation to make sure that he put to Josh and addressed it to me when he signed it. And man, I'm so grateful I've got that. So great. I just feel, I felt the time and I still feel it now. I just felt like, because man, I was 16 years old, man, sitting in my room, loser kid, dreaming that one day Rush would come to Dallas and film a video. And I never believed it would happen. And it did happen. And I got to be there. And not only did I get to be there, but and it was the anniversary. It was like the 25th anniversary, 35th anniversary of the Signals record that year too. So they ended up doing my favorite song from that record, The Analog Kid, at that show, which was another treat. And, I got to get one of my favorite records signed, not only signed by all, it would have been great. It would have been fine. It would have been awesome. I would be just as happy if I would have had the record signed by all three members. But Neil took it that extra mile for me because I know he really understood and really got what I was saying in my letter, that I'm so fucking glad. I'm so glad I did that, man. I'm so glad that I took the time to do that. I'm glad that how he affected me got across to the man, that in his life, he read my letter and he made sure that, I knew, because he could have just signed his name and that would have been it and I would have been fine with it, But no, he took that extra thing to say to Josh, to make sure I knew, hey man, I read your letter and I got it. And I've just been thinking about that a lot since Friday. What a band, though. God, there'll never be another band like Rush. And just not only as musicians, but as human beings too. They never did the rock star groupie thing. They were never addicted to drugs. They never acted better than anybody else. I don't know. I just would not be the person that I am today without Neil Elwood Peart. I just want to go on record and make sure that's known. And it's a terrible loss. It really is. Coming to grips, it's been difficult enough over the past 4 or 5 years, coming to grips with, the idea that they were not going to tour anymore, and that as a band, as an entity, they were done. And that alone has been tough enough, to deal with. You go, man, I never get to see those guys play live again. It sucks, but, and trying to stay grateful for what I did get to see. Because like I said, I got to see them 9 more times than a lot of Rush fans did. So I'm grateful for that. I've got that record that's signed by all 3 members, personally signed to me from Neil. A lot of people don't have that. A whole lot of people don't have that. I got to be at a live concert filming in my town by my favorite band of all time. I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful that, I just don't, I would not be the free thinker and the truth seeker I am. And we're going to get that into that. We're going to get into the records. We're going to get into the music more. This is just part 1. So I'll get into that too. But yeah, man, it's just very emotional for me. And grieving is a process, and you have to do it. If you skip that process, man, it will come back and haunt you later. I've lived it. I've done it. And I will never fucking do it again. So I'm not ashamed to let my emotions out, and there's just not a bigger influence on my life than Neil. Just not. I've thought about that. It just isn't. Not just in terms of music, but in how you view the world and how you express that view of the world to others. So, but it's a tragedy. Just the like I said, coming to grips with the fact that we'd never see the band again. That was one thing, but now, he was a great writer too. I've read a bunch of his books. Just the idea that we'll never get any more of those, those great lyrics, man, is what is a real tragedy. Rush is not like every other band. A lot of people say, oh, well, they probably got stuff in the vaults, where they'll come back. No, Rush was not that kind of a band. Rush didn't have unreleased songs and B-sides and shit like a lot of bands. They weren't that kind of a band. They've talked about that many times. They wrote just enough of what they needed for their records, and that was it. Now, certainly they've got stuff in the vaults as far as, old shows, old recordings and stuff, but they don't own any of that anymore. None of those releases, they've come out with a lot of, re-releases and reissue, remaster stuff, vinyl stuff over the last few years, but they don't have any say on that. Yes, they get final approval, but I guess that was part of the deal with Neil when he found out about his illness. I guess he, either for purposes of wanting the cash up front to try and fight the cancer, I don't know. We may not ever know. But again, that was one of the big indicators for me is when they sold the rights to their music off and took a lump sum payment up front. I was like, that's a bit weird. That's real final. And they sold off their management company and everything too that was theirs that they owned. That's real final. Everyone's going, oh, maybe they'll come back and they'll get another drummer and Neil will stay home and they'll write lyrics and they'll get, no, not when you, no, man, people were really in denial about it. And I was, no, that's not going to happen when you sell off the rights to your songs and you sell off your management company that you started. That's just, there was something about it where I knew it was something more than him just wanting to retire and spend time with his daughter. But his daughter is now 10 years old. I remember about a year ago, I heard an interview with Getty, and he was talking about how Neil at that time was teaching her how to play drums. And she wants to be a drummer just like her dad. That's awesome, you know. But it's a terrible loss. I mean, you know, it always is. But none of the other, it's been a lot of celebrity deaths through the years, you know, and I've had to deal with that pretty much from the very first time I got into music. It's like, God, back in the 90s was terrible for me. God, every time I would get into a band back in the 90s, every single time I would get into a band or get like somebody, they would die right after I got into them. It gave me a complex after a while. I ain't gonna lie. It started to give me a complex. It really did. I really kind of had a breakdown in the late 90s, man, because, I mean, it's like I got into Nirvana. I saw them live in concert. I saw them on the In Utero tour, 94 in December. 4 months later, he's dead. I got into, remember the band Blind Melon? I saw them in Dallas at a tiny club on the Soup Tour, 95. And got to meet Shannon Hoon after the show. And he had these cockroaches. It was like a necklace of cockroaches around his neck. And I was like, hey, man, what the fuck? I was like, why do you have those cockroaches tattooed around your neck? He's like, oh, man, I'm definitely fucking afraid of cockroaches. You believe that shit? I'm like, what? I was like, well, then why would you I was 19. I didn't understand, like things like overcoming your fears by facing them when I was 19. It was too deep for me at that point, And he was like, oh, man, I had to get over my fear of it, man. I'm deathly afraid of cockroaches. So now every time I look in the mirror, I see those cockroaches, and it's helped me deal with it. Now I'm not scared. I used to just see a picture of a roach, and I'd freak out. They freak me the fuck out, man. He's like, I can't even see one, or I get a fucking panic attack, anxiety attack. And he was really cool, man. I was like, well, that's dope, man. And I really like that album, Soup. They wore that fucking, all I can say is that they wore that song out, but that Soup album was a great record, still a great record. I saw him at this tiny club called the Orbit Room in Dallas I used to play at. There was probably maybe 100, 150 people there. Got to meet him 2 nights later. The very next show they played, because they were from New Orleans, so they went from Dallas to New Orleans. 2 days fucking later, Kurt Schroeder, as Beavis and Butthead used to call him, Kurt Schroeder in town with a sore end. Kurt Loder comes on, the MTV News, or Shannon Hoon from the band Blind Melon has died. Heroin overdose. I'm like, what? Dude, I just saw the guy. I just saw the guy 2 nights ago. He didn't have any track marks. His eyes weren't pinned back. I've been around some junkies, dude. Been around some in my time. Been around some opiate heads in my time. Same thing with Kurt Cobain. That guy didn't look like a fucking junkie when I saw him. Shannon Hoon didn't either. 2 days after I met Shannon Hoon, he was dead, man. That fucked me up. Then I saw Sublime. I saw Bradley Nowell from Sublime on the very first Warped Tour. I was at Lollapalooza that day over at Fair Park. They were over in Deep Ellum by where the Bomb Factory is. That was where the first Warped Tour was. It was a small little thing. It wasn't even big yet. They had the street blocked off. They had a stage at one end and some ramps, skateboard ramps, bike ramps, stuff at the other. And I went over there there was a couple of bands that were playing earlier. I can't remember who it was. Early in the day. So I went over, I drove over there real quick, saw Sublime because I was into that 40 Ounces of Freedom album. I actually was like single-handedly responsible when I worked at a record store for getting Sublime known in Texas. I was the first person to get their records into Texas. And the label told me that at the time because I saw them on 120 Minutes and I saw the video for Date Rape that had Ron Jeremy in it. He was butt raped by a large inmate. They did not have their records in Texas and couldn't figure out how to get their records in Texas at that time. And I worked at a little record store at that time. And I ordered, and dude, I'll take 20. They're like, no shit. And so I got like 20 down there, and their A&R guy got me a pass. So I was able to go over. I had tickets over at Lollapalooza. I went over. I watched Sublime set. I watched them play. They were badass. I went back over to Lollapalooza with my friends. I used to play that 40 Ounces of Freedom band in my store all the time. God, I ought to get a check. There's a lot of bands that owe me. I tell you what, there's a lot of bands that owe me checks. There are a lot of bands I ought to get a check for royalty check from. I have moved some records or some bands, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, I have. Back in my day. And then I swear it wasn't even, I don't know, a few months later, 6 months later, I can't remember how long it was. Bradley Knowles dead. Heroin overdose. Man, I was like, what the fuck, dude? Like everybody I like, as soon as I get into them and I get to go see them, they die. There was a local band here from Dallas called Tripping Daisy. And I started following them 93, the all ages show at the Agora Ballroom on Northwest Highway. I mean, I was there the night they got signed. I mean, you'll never see that again. Literally, I saw them walk off the stage, walk out the back door of the venue. I was back there hanging out, talking to the band. Literally, a limo pulled up. I mean, like something out of the Blues Brothers or out. I mean, you'll never see this again. Literally. A fucking limo pulls up like something out of a movie. A guy with smoking a fucking cigar gets out, contract in hand, whisks them off. It was a guy representative from Island Records, whisked them off to the airport, signed them to a record deal right then and there, and I fucking saw it. I witnessed it, man. I was there. I followed them all the way till their end in 1999. I saw them 75 times across multiple states. I saw them one time. I saw them 5 times in one weekend. One time I saw them 3 times in one day once. I eventually got put on the permanent golden ticket guest list where I could show up to any show anywhere they played anywhere in the world, and I would get in for free. What ended up being their last show was at the Psychedelic Festival in Fort Worth. And I decided just to make the night interesting. I remember just to make the night interesting, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Make the night interesting. I'm going to drop a little acid before I go. So I dropped some acid. I got there and like, they didn't know, nobody knew what time they were going to play. And nobody really knew where they were at on the bill. So their usual fan base didn't show up for this gig. And I was like the only fan of theirs that showed up. And I remember I was hanging out with Tim DeLauder, the singer, before the show. And I was like, hey man, what are you guys going to play tonight? You know, what's on the set list? He goes, I don't know, man. What do you want to hear? You come to all these shows. What do you want to hear? And I was like, man, I'll tell you the truth. I really like when you guys, they did an album called Tops Off Our Head, where they did it was a studio recording where they just improvised live and recorded and put it out. Nothing on it was pre-planned other than they did a cover of the song Never My Love by the Association. Other than that, everything on the record was literally off the top of their head. And it was amazing. It was just made up, recorded live, and they put it out. And they did a show like that one time that I saw too. I was like, man, I really like when you guys did that time when you just played and you just made stuff up. And he goes, really? You like that? And I was like, I thought it was incredible. It's like, you guys you can do anything. And he goes, okay, that's what we're going to do. And the first song on that was called the Tops Off Our Head. That was on that CD. And they got up there and he goes, this is the top of our head. And they played 45 minutes. It was just nonstop fucking made up on the spot. And before the show, I remember talking to their guitar player, Wes Berggren. I loved that guy. He was another guy that was no rock star ego in him whatsoever. I remember one time they played the Curtain Club in Dallas, and I said, hey, man, how do you play that one lick on the one song? And he goes, oh, that's easy. Come back here. He took me on his rig. It was after the show. Took me up on stage, put one of his other guitars on me, and sat there with me for like 20 minutes and showed me how to play this song. He's like, you got it, man. You just fucking keep playing like that. You fucking got it, dude. You don't fucking need my help. He's like, you're as good a fucking guitar player as I am. Fucking, you got this, dude. And then I saw him that night, that show, the Tops Over Our Head show, that Fort Worth thing, and he looked different, He kind of had a mustache. He was wearing this green John Deere hat. I'll never forget it. He was definitely on something. And I said, hey, man, how you doing? Wes, man, I haven't seen you in a while. And he was, oh, man, I'm all right, man. He's like, I'll never forget this. It was just weird. And I guess it burned in my brain because I was on a little bit of acid, It's just kind of like a microdose. It wasn't a lot. But I remember he looked at me in the eyes, and he said, Josh, he goes, man, I'll see you on the flip side. I was like, what? I was like, what'd you say? I said, Wes, what'd you say? He goes, I'll see you on the flip side, man. I was like, all right. I didn't, but I was like, that's kind of weird. Didn't think much of it. They played the show, went home, and then a week later, he was dead. Oh, I guess it was like a combination of a bunch of different prescription drugs or something. I don't know. That about did me in. Because it was all the other ones, those were just, those are people I just saw, or maybe just, I didn't meet Kurt Cobain. I mean, I didn't meet Bradley. I met Shannon Hoon, but, Wes Berggren, I mean, he was homegrown, man. He was, I'd spent at that time, 93 to 99 felt like a good portion of my life was all about that band, was following that. That's what I did every weekend. All right, people at work, what are you doing this weekend? Going to see Trippin' Daisy? Yep, going to see them 3 times. People were like, Jesus. 75 times I saw them. Was there with them when they went through the, be on MTV, being on Beavis and Butthead. And there was a year or so where I couldn't even get close to them because they were so big. And then they came to this little college town I lived in. I got to open for them, and man, it really did. It really gave me a complex for a long time, and I realized after a while, I was like, I never really, I guess because of the people that you're around or whatever, and certain people don't feel things as deeply as you feel them, or they don't feel them as emotionally deep as you do. And you tend to just let people persuade you, into feeling things the way they feel it. And I just won't do that anymore. The whole, get over it mentality or whatever. And I've kind of already started to see some of that, even though people haven't said it directly. People don't have to say everything directly for me to feel and know what they're thinking. Okay. And I've kind of already felt like I've kind of gotten that a little bit just in the last 2 days, just since Neil's died. Look, I'm not over it, and I'm not going to get over it, and I'm not going to fucking get over it and move on quickly just because you think I should. I don't give a fuck if you're tired of seeing me post Rush stuff on fucking Facebook. Get over it. You better get over it or block me or fuck off, one or the other. Because I'm not going to get over it. Grieving is a process, and if you don't take the time to do that process, it will come back and bite you in the ass later, and you will regret it. But people are, they don't want their spouse or significant other to, because their spouse doesn't feel the same way they do about Rush or Neil, so they can't. You're going to regret it. You're going to regret, whatever it might be. Listen, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I'm not going to get over it quick. This is a process, and this is how I'm grieving. This is how I choose to do it, and this is how, listening to I've seen people posting stuff since Neil died saying, oh, you know, I can't even listen to their music right now. It hurts too bad. No, not for me. No, you need to. You need to listen to their music. It's going to hurt worse later. Man, ever since Friday, I've been listening to all their vinyl records. I've been watching all the videos. I've been going through my collection. I posted 3 concerts on my other YouTube channel. It's been cathartic, man. It's been great. Because that's what you got to focus on. Not how the man died, but how the man lived. And how he affected you. And that's what I'm doing. I'm celebrating the man. And yeah, it hurts. And yeah, I'm upset about it. I mean, this guy, you know, yeah. Man, Rush has always been they're my number one favorite band of all time. There'll never be another one. And, you know, when someone has that kind of profound effect on your life, whether it be a family member or whoever it is, you know, I see that a lot, man. I don't know. It pisses me off sometimes. I never feel like I can't express it, but I get tired of people just like a lot of people act like, oh, somebody's dead. No, you're not allowed to talk about them anymore. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I kind of feel like that with my dad a little bit. I kind of feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like sometimes like nobody even like you can't even bring him up or something. Like some people get weird about it. Like, dude, I'm not just going to forget. Just because somebody's dead doesn't mean you should forget about them. That's when you should talk about them more. You should talk about them more after they're dead. You should celebrate. Otherwise, what did they live for? So I'm not going to shut up, and I'm not going to stop talking about it. And I'm not just going to go along to get along and move on and, oh, just get over it, move on. No, this man had a profound effect not only on me, but the entire world. And it should be talked about, celebrated, and not just, oh, he's dead, move on. Get over it, let's on to the next thing. Fuck that. Fuck that shit. People say, oh, it's not healthy to dwell. No, it's not healthy to shove your emotions down and just act like, you know, and not express those emotions when somebody passes and just go get over it and move on. No, that's not healthy. It's the opposite. And so that's what I'm doing here, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. And, you know, if you're a Rush fan and you're a Neil Peart fan, you should do the same thing. Fly that flag high, baby. Crank fucking moving pictures up. Crank exit stage left up. Crank signals up. Crank those concert videos up, man. I'm never going to forget him, and I'm never going to stop celebrating the man, the band, or the music. Never. In fact, I realized the other day, Saturday, I guess it was, after Neil died, I realized, I went, I don't know, I don't know why I never did this. I just realized, well, you know what? I just realized I don't have a fucking Rush tattoo. I ought to be fucking ashamed of myself. I got 4 other tattoos. I don't have a fucking Rush tattoo. I ought to be fucking ashamed of myself. That's going on my fucking to-do list for 2020. I'm getting some kind of, or maybe more than one, I'm getting some kind of fucking badass Rush tattoo this year. The fact I don't already fucking have one is a goddamn travesty. I ought to be ashamed of myself. Ought to be ashamed of myself. God damn. Well, this is the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming, and when we get into part 2, we're going to take a deep dive. And I'm going to do like I do on the other episodes of the Whatever Whenever podcast. You know how I do movie of the week and album of the week and all that stuff. We're going to do that too. But I'm going to give you album of the week Rush. I'm going to give you movie of the week for Rush for a particular concert video. And I'm going to do a deep dive through all the songs, all the records, and the entire Rush catalog coming up in part 2.